not where I want it to be. Hey, folks. I'm going to adjust my camera a little bit. I think that's good enough. Y'all can see me, right? How's everybody? I'm going to give it a second because I know this thing is always latent. So we'll give everybody a minute to get on. Happy, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Yeah, I normally do this on Thursday, so this isn't my normal day. But thank y'all for being here, those who are here. So we will start in exactly 5 minutes, but I'll get my shout outs in real quick. All right. So let me see. What's up? C. Hill, J. Law, Dina Newton, what up? Tierra Hicks, Ashley B. Asia Carlay, Albert Old School. Curly Canuck. Well, thank you for hanging before you got to take your nap. I appreciate it. CB Love, DW, Anastasia 25, Alex B, Eleanor Smith. Make sure y'all check out her podcast. Eleanor, put the information for your podcast in the chat. Felicia Michelle, Piano Kid, B, Anita, Melody Nia, Kayla, Sequoia Harrison, Marlon Harrison. I don't think they're related. They just got Harrison on there. All right, so I am so tired, guys, but we're gonna make this work. This has not been a good day, but we will make this work. All right, so I'm gonna need y'all to cheer me up, keep my energy up. All right, I'm gonna give y'all the best I can give y'all with the energy that I got right now. What up, Raywin? It's crazy. I had a really good weekend. There's just been so much going on because there's a whole lot of things taking place. Nothing bad, but on a more positive note, my cousin Brandon had come to town with his whole family, so I got to hang with them for the weekend. That was a lot of fun. Just getting some time with family and everything. What else been going on? I visited my mom this weekend. Then I'm in Chicago the next weekend. So I'm all over. There's not enough hours in a day. I'm like, I don't know if you can see it on my face, but I'm worn out right now. Just so much going on. But it is what it is. Such is life. You have your seasons and things kind of spin and jump into all kind of different spaces. But it is what it is. Also, shout out to those who made it to the last book club session. That was a really good session we had. I appreciate everybody who's on it. For those who have been asking, we're reading the book Color of Law from Richard Rothstein. And anybody can still join. Our next session is going to be May 16th at 9 p.m. And we're going to be going over chapters 5 through 9. And so that's in about 3 weeks from now. Actually, I think it's exactly 3 weeks from today. I might be having it mixed up. So, for those who are interested, feel free to join us. We have some really great discussions. People are very open, which I love. People love to kind of share the different experiences with their families and how some of the content in the book correlates to where they are in life. And really, there's so much in that book that you can there's so many tidbits that you can take out, mainly because it's a book where there's nothing about opinion in it. It's just literally numbers and facts about, pretty much how this country was mapped out from after probably the Civil War, at the end of Reconstruction, how the country was mapped out, how redlining affects us and still, plays a role in today. And just, talking about all these different places like Levittown or Richmond, California, or Palo Alto, California, or Baltimore, which of course we know Baltimore is the first place where they had one of the covenants that would pretty much open the door for redlining back in 1910. There's just so many tidbits in that book. So for those who are still interested in joining, we will have our next segment on May 16th. All right. So I want to go ahead and jump right into my content. Because I do need a Starbucks, Tanika. Like my favorite thing from Starbucks, but I'm on this no sugar thing. I've been on it for like 2 months, so no sugar for me. But when I do have sugar, I always like that. There's like that strawberry something refresher. I be tearing that thing up. Like that thing hits. And I like it with the water base. I don't like it with the lemonade. The lemonade be tasting weird sometimes. But that would probably help. If I don't get that, I always get the medicine ball. Anyway, so I want to jump right into what everybody's been talking about the last few days. I know I've been missing, so there's all kind of subjects that we have not covered, but it is what it is. We'll keep it moving. Let's jump right into the conversation around Elon Musk and Twitter. You know what I mean? And so as we know, Elon Musk, who's this super, 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 super wealthy billionaire, pretty much wants to buy Twitter. And they've gone into the boardrooms and had these meetings, and it looks like it's probably something that's gonna pull through. They've got the financing there, and those dots are being put over the i's and the t's are being crossed, and so on and so forth. And so what I found interesting, and because really my conversation really doesn't even have anything to do with Twitter, I just want to go into something that I've seen so many people rant and rave about for the last few days, and I just find it so interesting. So one of his main reasons for wanting to really jump on the, I guess, the Twitter bandwagon and kind of just take it over is there's been this conversation of freedom of speech, and this conversation of our rights to free speech are being attacked, and blah 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 blah, and all this other crazy stuff. And so there's been this narrative that's been painted like, all of a sudden when people express themselves, they lose everything. And it's so interesting because I'm like, if you say so. And so what I find interesting, because really you're hearing the freedom of speech rants coming from pretty much the very like right wing, very conservative, a lot of times heavy in the GOP kind of demographic. I mean, you hear it across the board, but it's so interesting because for me, it seems like the main people who keep ranting and raving about freedom of speech are the same ones literally running, to push legislation that limits the free speech of people, that limits what can be talked about in the classroom, that limits what people can be trained on in the workplace. Like, you're literally seeing this attack that takes place against anything that goes against the status quo. And we've had this conversation a million times, but it's so funny because really what they mean when they say freedom of speech, they just want to be in a space where they won't get called out when they say racist, terrible things or do terrible things. The problem is they don't like being told about themselves, because if we want to be honest, this whole idea of people being canceled is not really a real thing. Who can we name that's actually really been canceled for the things that they've done, right? The only people that I can think about that have had some kind of cancellation that has taken place, a lot of times might be musicians, and that cancellation has to more so do with being blacklisted from their outlets for exposure. But over time, they still rebuild their audience. I referenced the Dixie Chicks a long time. Well, now they're the Chicks. Years ago, with what happened when they made their statements about George Bush, or when Natalie said her statements about George Bush and not supporting the war, and how country radio blacklisted them, banned them from the different radio stations. There were gun threats and bomb threats at the concerts and everything like that. People steamrolled over the records. When they finally did go back on another tour in 06, 07, they weren't even allowed to go to some cities because the vendors were like, don't even show up here because we're not even going to allow you to perform. So we saw that side. We saw what happened with Janet after the Super Bowl. Fortunately for her, because her legacy was so cemented, she had a hardcore fan base that, you couldn't really shut her all the way out. Yes, her career was heavily impacted, but she's still touring. She doing Essence, and I know she has a few spot dates, and most likely she's probably doing another arena tour before she most likely retires. And I just saw that her documentary is the most viewed, I guess, artist documentary ever to air on cable, 20 million viewers or something like that. Chrisette Michelle's the only person I can almost think of, but even with Chrisette, with the bridges that she burned them in a space where she already didn't have a large enough audience anyway. Now, people often made the comparisons between like a Chrisette and a Kanye, but the difference between Chrisette and Kanye is that Kanye's core audience is white men. Okay, hip hop heads, black folks support Kanye to an extent, depending on who is still rocking with him or vice versa. But Kanye had literally a white movement behind him. White men love Kanye West. So even though the black community was pissed off, he still had a white following to kind of push him. But anyway, with that being said, it's so interesting because I was just thinking, I'm like, they kept saying freedom of speech, our freedom of speech. And when you look at the different media platforms, you have politicians ranting about their freedom of speech is being attacked. And if they don't say freedom of speech, they use the term woke. They always use the term woke. I'll get to that in a second. But, so it's freedom of speech is under attack, but they have no problem trying to silence people who discuss real history, who bring up conversations about redlining or slavery or police brutality or the judicial system or the prison system, or the prison industrial complex, class warfare, the move bombing, which I do want to address in a second. We've talked about it, but I was doing my own little research on that, and I was like, the details with that are just out of pocket. Thank you to Tanaka Johnson. Again, you've seen this whole movement with CRT, where literally anything black goes under the CRT bubble, critical race theory. And so they've created this all-out war where it's to the point where, you go to a place like Virginia, and there's a hotline for parents to call and report teachers that are allegedly teaching critical race theory. And again, the idea of like woke right now or critical race theory, it's getting the same treatment that you would give something like people when people use the race card, a blanket statement or a blanket term that you can use to dismiss any and everything. Because once you condition people to see something as an entity that can be dismissed in association with a specific term, you see how the people react. All right, you can talk about how there's been literally they're fighting and clawing in regards to everything around the 1619 project. And mind you, 1619 project doesn't even go into everything because there's so much more that could have been added. And so there's so many, just anything that challenges the status quo, that maintains the idea of white comfortability, is pretty much under attack at the moment. So it's so funny when I hear people say freedom of speech is under our freedom of speech is under attack. What is under attack? Please tell me. Because even when we talk about the politicians, all of these racist politicians that say and do these horrible racist things, or say all these offensive things, they all get reelected. They all still carry power. They all carry influence. Nothing is happening to them. You know what I mean? And so when you really get into the gist of why this current movement is here, it's because, again, I've said this before, when you jump into the elements of what has happened in this country and even globally to people who just look like me, but specifically in the United States, when you talk about what has happened to Black Americans and you start digging through the different layers, the next step, once you recognize what those issues are, is that you start to question why. And you peel back the layers, because every question leads to an earlier origin, which leads to an earlier answer. And so what ends up happening, no matter how you dissect this, no matter how much you twist it, everything centers back to the idea of anti-blackness backed by the system of white supremacy. And it was something that was structural, because these conversations, people are trying to center this around feelings, but this is not about feelings. This is about policy, and recognizing that when you recognize and you highlight and see the origins of what is in relation to how things are today in regards to how people are treated systemically when it comes to race, it leads to the question of, well, what do you do to fix it? And then again, we get to that next answer where, again, everybody has their viewpoints, but everybody knows at this point reparations is a conversation that has been circulating, and people don't want to have those conversations because the idea of reparations scares people. The idea of Black people getting anything, even just getting basic civil rights, not even getting a huge payout. And again, when I talk about reparations, for me, reparations would be more than a check. Reparations is supposed to restore and make those who have been wronged whole. And it doesn't mean you write a check and you bounce out. It's an entire system that's put into place to ensure that the rights or the wrongs have been righted over time. Because if you just think you can just write a check and that's it, that's not going to fix the systemic issues that are still there. Whiteness still runs this country. When people make the rants like, oh my God, the country's it's not going to be a majority white country after this year, doesn't matter. The system of whiteness is still going to be here. People have already been indoctrinated and bought into that system. So it doesn't matter that white people will soon become a minority. The idea of whiteness and things that push the ideals that keep white Americans comfortable will still be the status quo, even when Black and brown groups become a majority. And then when you talk about the conversation of Black and brown groups, these groups are not even all on the same page because we're all fighting and clawing for something different. And then anti-Blackness jumps into that conversation, because even when you try to do the whole coalition of Black and brown people together, anti-Blackness shows right on up. And Black people still get put to the back of the line, no matter what. And so when I go back to the idea of like the questions of why or the origins, like again, everything that we're living in right now has some origin to something earlier. So even with the issues taking place with housing, because right now we're in this space where these large corporations are buying up all the properties, and it's almost impossible to buy a house right now. But even when you just talk about farmland that Black farmers lost, I don't think people realize that of the 15 million acres that Black farmers once had, they lost 14 million of it. And it wasn't because Black farmers like, oh, I'm just going to sell my farm and move to the big city. No, it was the laws that we had. It was the conversations around heirs land, which I'll come right back to in a second. It was the conversations of eminent domain, where literally the government was just going and seizing land. It goes back to the conversation about Black farmers not being eligible for USDA benefits, which ties back to heirs land. A lot of Black farmers who had land, when they passed on, it became heirs land and it went on to their family. But the rules that exist with heirs land in a lot of different states pretty much states that that land can only be sold and operated as is. Once it's heirs land, because it's not recognized by the government, because heirs land just means there's no official documentation of the deeds and everything like that. It's pretty much word of mouth through the family. You are not allowed to pretty much do anything that would have any kind of interference with commerce on that land. You're not able to start a business on that land. If a hurricane, and I'll use South Carolina as a perfect example because I know their law a little bit better than other places. So with South Carolina and their heirs land rules. So again, hurricane comes and Hurricane Bertha, 1995 or 96, I can't remember, hits the Carolinas, right? South Carolina, North Carolina get hit pretty bad, right? People who had property damage that would have been on heirs land during that time period did not qualify for FEMA funding once the storms came in and did the damage. So the people that live on that land, it's up to them to restore whatever happens on their property. And again, when you're talking about what's insurable, that's another conversation. When you're talking heirs land, not everything is always insurable. And again, when we talk with the rules that exist within how to manage heirs land, heirs land just means the land is given to this specific family. There's no way to draw out different plots of land, and this relative gets that, and that relative gets that. There's none of that. And so if I have this, let's pretend this is 50 acres, right? This is 50 acres that's just chilling right here, right? And this is the Calvin heirs land. I've passed on. It's 2089, and I've moved on into whatever else is after this life, right? And so I leave all of this to my family, right? And so my family decides, okay, cousin so-and-so is going to get this piece. They're going to get this piece. This person's getting that piece. This distant grandchild's getting this piece. And everybody has a little piece of the land. If one person, and again, we're operating with the idea of heirs land, if this was still that same scenario. If one person chooses to sell their plot of land, like, oh, I'm going to sell my little piece because I want to move to Boston, right? And they sell it to a developer. What they've actually done is they've sold all of this because, again, heirs land, plots individually are not recognized by the state government or by the federal government. It's just seen as, a family piece of land. So even if these other family members have no idea that this person wants to sell their piece of land, and this person may just think they're only selling this little piece, the person that's purchasing the property has the right to all of this. And so when you get back into what happened, so many people lost their land because, again, that random family member decided to sell, or maybe they weren't even in a space where they had that kind of connection with that family. Sometimes you have that long lost relative that passes on and leaves you something, and maybe you don't want the house, so you just sell it and try to take the money for it. Those kind of situations took place. And so getting back to what I was saying about the USDA, and so in order to even be considered eligible for the USDA benefits, this is something that would pretty much create, the loans and the grants that would come for people that needed material to farm. Because again, when you have these big giant plots of land, you just can't be out there pushing the hoe by yourself and everything else like that. So people needed money to get the equipment, to get the things for irrigation and fertilizers and all of that. White farmers in this country got all of those benefits to kind of sustain their farms. That's why when we saw what happened under the last administration, when farmers started losing all their money because we went into the little trade wars with China, that's why they had the big giant bailout for farmers in America. However, 98% of the farmers in America who were Black were left out of that because, again, they were not USDA farms. They weren't eligible for those funds. And that's why we've had the lawsuits where, the Biden administration has, there's been the ruling that, yes, you have to make these people whole in regards to the fact that they've been left out of all these programs. However, because there's a line item within that settlement that pretty much says it's going towards disadvantaged farmers, and it's not specifically a line item that says, Black farmers that can trace their lineage to when all of these programs would have excluded them. You had white farmers go and sue and say, what about us? After they already got money. What about us? And so now that $5 billion is still in litigation because, people want to sue about this money that should not go to them in the first place. But again, these are some of the things that like Black farmers deal with. And so again, a lot of that land that Black people had, and I was only specifically speaking about the farmers' land as far as the 15 million acres we once had. That doesn't even include just Black individuals who have their own land wherever it's at. Because then when we talk about how our freeway systems were built, when we talk about how different establishments were destroyed and bulldozed or whatever to create something else. We talked about, I think on the last live, Seneca Village, which is now Central Park. When you talk about where a lot of these freeways ended up, when we talked about Minneapolis and the neighborhoods that were destroyed there in order to create the freeway system. And again, what happened in Minneapolis happened all over. It happened in DC, happened in St. Louis, happened in Baltimore. It happened in so many different regions of the world. And it's so funny because now that all of these cities are being gentrified and white Americans are choosing to move back into these spaces, now you're seeing the effort to kind of green up the cities. Let's plant more trees. Let's put some grass here. Let's have those roofs, the ceilings and the roofs that have like it's like the Mother Nature roof where the rain comes and feeds the plants on the roof and it recycles the water and clears the air and does all this other stuff. Now the other people are moving in, they want to put all that in there. And that's mainly because everybody knows when Black people were still redlined and only allowed to even live in certain segments of the cities, those were the regions that were neglected. Those were the regions where it was nothing but tarmac, glass, and cement. And so the temperature happened to be higher in those regions. That's why when you look at your weather report, a lot of times for those who live in the metropolitan city, the temperature, if you're not like in the desert, but like a place like, if I use like DC as an example, which may not be the best example because DC is still by water, but DC's temperature sometimes tends to be a little bit higher than some of the other places in the region, and a lot of metropolitan cities have that same experience. And it's because, again, when you have nothing but glass and metal and cement and the asphalt to make the street, and the glass is hitting the street and the sun's reflecting, heat just kind of sits and concentrates. And so of course the temperature is hotter in those regions. That also plays a role as to why more kids that live in metropolitan cities tend to be more asthmatic than kids that live out in the suburbs or that live out further out into rural areas, because the air quality sucks. And so again, all of this just ties, like, I could rant all day and just keep segueing into different elements of this conversation and never shut up, because again, there is just so much that ties to the origins of what is in reality when we come to how Black people have been treated. And so, and going back to the farmers bit, that's why you had the Pickford versus Glickman lawsuit in 1999, where 400 Black farmers sued the federal government about what was happening with the USDA. And so even with that case, litigation is still shifting. I think where they may have dropped, I don't want to say dropped the ball, but what may have compromised that specific case was because it was pretty much line item that it was Black farmers. And of course, the racist people on the other end said, oh, we can't do that. We can't, draw out policies specifically for different races of people. And so I think in modern times, some of the conversations are more so centered around the idea of lineage in regards to making sure that people get what's rightfully theirs, so that way judges and opposing counsel can't try to say this is a racist policy, because if you can tie the lineage to the offense as far as receiving that offense and being on the receiving end of it, now you can highlight and showcase why people were left in a place where they need to be made whole. And so that's just that specific case. When we talk about like things like the move bombing, and this is going back to what I was saying as far as why people want to silence all these conversations, because no matter which one you had, it highlights the flaws of the United States. When you talk about the move bombing, most people just know the move bombing as, okay, there was this time in the 80s where in the city of Philadelphia, they dropped a bomb on the house because there was this activist group that they wanted to get out, and it, blew up the entire city block and killed a few kids and stuff like that. But when you really get into the logistics of what was going on with that, this was an ongoing issue for years. The movement already was in a totally different location. And back in 1978, the police actually came and just bulldozed the house down. Like just bulldoze the house. Construction machine, just tear it all down, get them out of there. And so they find a new location. We get to 1985. And mind you, even before 1985, one of the things that kind of triggered, because they talk about like the Move 9, those were the people that had been arrested and incarcerated and imprisoned and so on and so forth. When it came to the issues that took place around the time when they had bulldozed the house, you literally had the police on camera beating a man, which was one of the men in the movement, literally beating him in the head with a police helmet, breaking his jaw, live TV, right? Police beating this man down, stumping him out, all of that, just for all of America to see. And so when we're talking about the conversations of police brutality, what we're seeing in 2022 is nothing new under the sun. It just keeps going and keep going. But getting back to 85, they get to this newer location. Residents in the area are not very happy about this movement being there. And so there's all these different things that take place. There's back and forth with the mayor, back and forth with the sheriff's office, back and forth with the residents of the area who didn't want that group to be there. And so what ended up happening is you have the police department literally plant explosives all around the building. What we were always taught, if you were taught it, was that they just dropped the bomb on the top. Actually, what initially happened is they already had explosives planted all around the building. This is one of the reasons why a lot of the adjacent properties also were destroyed when the bomb dropped. The bomb dropped, it triggered the other explosive to explode, and this is where we were at. And then to make things worse, while that was happening, you had the firefighters spraying water into the buildings and tear gas at the same time. And so literally, you're pretty much torturing these people in this property. And mind you, the kids, the babies are in there. Now, it doesn't matter what you feel about the movement or what their politics was. At the end of the day, you have children literally in a unit and y'all just go in there and blow it all up. And so you end up destroying an entire set of city blocks because you wanted to make an example out of somebody, because the ego had gotten away as far as those who were in charge. And that's where we're at. You know what I mean? And then people sometimes think that all of these conversations are new. They're not. Like when you're talking about Black Americans who are constantly uprising or bringing awareness to what's happening, this has always been going. There's kind of this shift in modern times, where my generation and the generation that has come after mine sometimes like to dismiss what those in the past have fought for. Like, I don't think people realize, like, you go back to 1917, there was this huge giant riot in New York. You know what I mean? And this was not even a riot, but this was a march or a protest just calling out all of the Jim Crow laws that existed at the time and highlighting the fact that, listen, these are the issues that are affecting us. And for us to pay taxes in this city and in this country, and for us to deal with the things that we deal with, why is it that we don't have the same rights as everybody else? Like, those are kind of the issues that take place. And then it gets even deeper. Then when we really just jump into policy, right? And so we've always been taught that the New Deal, is what saved America. FDR comes in there, he gives a New Deal, and all is well, America, freedom, yeah. And so what people forget is, when a New Deal initially came out, one, we already know Black people were left out of it, but to add like insult to injury, the initial benefits of the New Deal did not create sustaining careers. And so the United States went into another recession in 1937. So what does that mean for Black Americans? That meant that we were already left out of the New Deal to begin with. But now that the economy is dropping and going down again, and now more white Americans are suffering, that means Black people get pushed even further to the back of the line. Literally, what ended up saving America was World War II, the prep that would have gone into creating the ideas around World War II, as far as, working on the home front, rationing everything, starting all these new factories, because again, all these factories repurposed themselves. Once we got into the war. And that's one of the reasons why, I think I wrote it down on my phone. When we go back to, what year was that? When we go back to like 1942 to 1943, there were only 139 cars made in this country, because again, all of the supplies, everything was being made to go and fight across the water. You know what I mean? And so that even goes back into our conversations about public housing, which we've had before. I think I talked about it on my Steve Harvey video. But again, public housing at one point in time was not the public housing that we know now, because there was a lumber shortage, because again, everything was being repurposed to, take care of the war. There pretty much was a freeze on construction of housing. There's this big giant freeze because there's a lumber shortage. And so they made a lot of temporary housing, and even with the temporary housing, it wasn't luxurious, but it also wasn't the big giant high rises that they stuffed Black people into in the 1960s and the 70s. It was kind of a modest kind of setup where, yeah, we're going to have you people live in these establishments until, things kind of shift into a better predicament and there's more supplies. And so the initial tenets of a lot of these public housing complexes were middle-class white Americans who were just waiting for the A-OK to go and buy and construct a house. And so the original public housing complexes that existed were not the high rises. They were 2 or 3 story buildings that, again, the neighborhoods were fully developed. They had fields and playgrounds and little ponds, and everybody had driveways, and the schools were in there. Everything was fine and dandy. Then when when we get into the space where, because again, at the same time, there's 2 things happening. When you go back to the 1930s, they were already making the push for people to want to buy housing. They started saying it's patriotic to buy houses. The idea was, own a home. That's where the idea of the white picket fence comes from. The marketing and the promotions that were pushed out in the 1930s. So all of that gets frozen as we jump into World War II. You know what I mean? Because that was one of the things when we're talking about the 1930s that they were trying to get people to kind of, I guess, they jump into in regards to the response to the Great Depression, trying to get people to understand that, yeah, the country kind of sucks right now, but if you have it, it'll be really great if you go and invest and buy a home, and so on and so forth. And so you have all of these white Americans excited to go and buy homes, but they can't because the lumber is not there. So they got to wait in public housing until there is more supplies available, and then they can go and build. And then this is around the time we also have redline introduced, right? Redlining comes about 20 years earlier as far as the covenants that existed. And like I said, it starts in Baltimore and it's kind of just spreads everywhere. And so what ends up happening, when you talked about Black, because there was a Black middle class that existed, but they weren't allowed to buy property where they wanted to. They had to buy it in those red areas. And so when we're talking about what ends up happening, I want to find this excerpt that I pulled out of the book that I referenced with our book club as far as The Color of Law. One of the things that was really interesting is where you had the Ford plant, right? So there was a Ford plant in Richmond, California. And at that point in time, they employed a lot of Black people, right? This is why Richmond, California is pretty much a Black city now. People who are there now, most likely their grandparents or their great grandparents came to this area in the 1920s, 30s to work at the Ford plant. And so you have all these Black individuals living in the Ford plant, right? Or not living in the plant, but working at the plant, living in Richmond, California. The plant decides to move, right, to Palo Alto, a little bit further down, this up and coming area. But let me tell you how trifling they were, right? So there was an ordinance that was created in Palo Alto where it said, as far as construction for new homes, because again, there's this big giant factory that's coming there, all these new people are going to move there. The only kind of properties that are allowed to be built in this area are single family homes. And if you paid attention on some of our videos and we talk about the FHA, when we talk about who was allowed to even receive an FHA loan, that's the Federal Housing Authority or Administration, as far as the people who give out the loans and stuff for housing. Black Americans were left out of that. We were not deemed valuable enough or responsible enough to have any kind of mortgages that would be backed by an FHA loan. And so we weren't eligible. And so with Palo Alto, what they put out there was the only construction that can take place in regards to housing can be single family homes. Black people weren't eligible to get any because, again, that conversation of redlining that neighborhood they weren't allowed to live in. So their only option was public housing or whatever apartments were there. And so this is where we're at. And then to make it even more out of pocket, because this is where policy comes in, and this is where we talk about commerce and business. The Ford plant had pretty much a clause where anybody who lived in Richmond that worked at that factory could not go to the Palo Alto location and get any kind of top tier positions. If they were able to slip through the cracks and somehow get a job there, it was going to be the bottom tier kind of positions that were there. But there pretty much was an ordinance where if you were employed at the Ford plant that was in Richmond, you could not work at the Palo Alto location. This is how Black people have always been left out of everything. And so when we're talking politics, this is what we're talking about. And so where was I going with this? Because I done went in so many different directions. So yeah, I was talking about the World War II pretty much saved us. And so, when we're talking about just the history that exists, you can dig and dig and dig, and you're always going to find something because there's just that much, I was about to cuss, stuff that happened specifically against Black Americans in this country. And this is one of the reasons why there's this huge movement right now to kind of silence these conversations, because as people gain access to find research, and I mean, we're at the point where people are pulling up the old census, documentation, all kind of things that weren't always available, and people are discovering and learning new things each and every day. It highlights just how many wrongs have taken place in this country, especially against Black Americans. And again, when we talk about the wrongs that have been there, the next question is why? Why did that happen? We know why, all right? We talk about the system of anti-Blackness backed by a system of white supremacy. And again, that idea of also like a white inferiority complex where the fear of Black people outperforming anybody with anything. And so you constantly kind of keep people pushed down. And then the next step is, well, what do we do to fix it? Nobody wants to get to the what do we do to fix it conversation, because again, there's the conversations of restorative justice. There's the conversations of reparations. There's the conversations of making people whole. And that scares people because they feel they're going to lose something by Black people just getting what's rightfully theirs. That's where we're at. And that's why you're seeing all these stupid right-wing politicians and public figures constantly rant about their freedom of speech being attacked. When in reality, white people get to run around and do any and everything they want and say what they want, and nothing happens. Yeah, people are outraged for a week or two. People have Twitter fingers and rant on Twitter and say whatever. And those people continue to do whatever they already do anyway, still make their same money. And that's where we're at. That's why even with the term woke is now something that's weaponized. Now we know years ago, woke was a term that pretty much how you saw it was almost a term of endearment within the Black collective. It was a way to highlight people within the Black collective that were kind of, they were on to something. They were intrigued by knowledge. They were intrigued by understanding different concepts, and they wanted to teach other people. And so we always used to say, oh, they're so woke, they're so woke, they're so woke. And then also in-house, people would also kind of use it to joke around. You have the kind of the visual of the barbershop and the one guy who's going to come in there and, we was kings, and so we kind of almost had our own inside jokes with that too. What ends up happening, and this is what happens in the space of social media, where now you have everybody from different backgrounds, belief systems, politics, everybody's using the same communicative space. And so now you're in a space where your culture is on full display for the world to see. So then you had the next thing where you had like a lot of white liberals take on the term woke, and they started applying it to everything that they were doing. Oh, we're so woke, we're so woke, we're so woke. And you have white conservatives who have now taken this term and weaponized it. And like I said, the whole idea of a blanket statement, if you just kind of pay attention to mainstream media, especially the mainstream media that leans a lot more to the right, you see the term woke used always as a way to kind of dismiss whatever the issue is, or silence or make people shut up in regards to what it is that they're offended about. Or again, how they do the race card, put it under the woke blanket, and then we can dismiss whatever it is. That's what they're doing right now with the CRT thing as well. And so everybody knows in regards to what critical race theory was more so originated around, that's college level academia related stuff, right? And so now somehow they've tried to place this in a bubble where, oh no, they're not just teaching it at the colleges, they're teaching this to the kindergartners. They're making 5-year-olds feel bad for being white. And so now we've changed the entire narrative. And so now anything that challenges the status quo, that does not highlight and put America on this pedestal of greatness, automatically goes under the CRT bubble. And then in come the laws that are punitive, in comes the restrictions, in comes the let's pull funding from this district if they talk about that, in comes the banning of books, all right? And not even just at the school, it's to the point where we have books being banned at public libraries. So people don't even have a choice to pick what it is that they wish to consume. So when we're talking about freedom of speech, I was like, y'all play for the main ones arguing about freedom of speech, y'all sure are like stripping down and gutting everything. And so, and it's on so many levels. It's not even just state and local levels. Let's not forget Trump, before he got out, one of the main things he was trying to push was he wanted to pull federal funding from any institution that did not highlight and celebrate our founding fathers. You know what I mean? And really what that meant was the handful of HBCUs that do get some kind of federal funding, or a place like Gallaudet, which is school for the deaf and hard of hearing, automatically, had that legislation been successful, a place like Howard would have had to just get rid of their entire history department, but not just their history department, probably their English department, their fine arts department, a lot of the departments that have any kind of correlation to the people, sociology, social work, anything that can tie back to anything that does not highlight and celebrate the founding fathers, okay? Because that's where we're at. Like one of the things, at least when I was at Howard, a lot of our education, yes, you still learned about whatever it was in your respective field, but it would always correlate and tie back to how it affects Black people collectively or globally. And so again, this is where we're at. So when people rant about freedom of speech, because that's what I've been hearing Elon Musk and his supporters running and ranting about all day. Elon, sir, you are a billionaire, all right? My opinion of somebody like an Elon Musk should not affect him because we're not even in the same world. Me and whatever it is that I make every year is that's a pack of gum for him. So they're kind of hopping on this fake, I'm just so offended at everyone challenging me, I can't express myself. And or they'll try to say, well, they kicked Trump off Twitter and that was a violation of his freedom of speech. First of all, Twitter it's a company. It's not mandated by the government. Your freedom of speech is protected by the government, not private companies. All right. Secondly, I'm sorry, the reason they kicked Cuckoo Man off of Twitter was because, listen, you use Twitter to pretty much incite a riot at the freaking Capitol. So look, that's on you. I don't know what you want us to do. And so again, you're seeing this whole movement of let's attack the woke, and because again they've weaponized the term and repurposed it, and again, white people have stolen that term, because listen to the term woke. If you're talking about grammar and how we speak, like you would say awaken. Woke clearly is something that Black folks were saying in-house amongst ourselves when we were kind of joking around. White people don't ever speak the same way that we do unless they've copied something that we've already done. This is why they always struggle to speak with African American vernacular. They can never keep up because the stuff never aligns. They try to put together all kind of phrases that don't even go together and try to present it and then be all on Twitter and Instagram talking in all these different languages. I'm like, y'all just sound like idiots right now. All kind of diction and vernacular that they're not even rooted in it. And again, it's like you're just playing a role at this point. And so it's a hot freaking mess. And it just gets deeper, because then even when you talk about what's happening with Florida, I know the whole thing with Disney in regards to the response to DeSantis, and he has like the Don't Say Gay bill that they pushed, and Disney said what they said. And, now he's kind of going and restructuring the laws in regards to the tax codes and what happens within that area. But one of the things that I wish people would have also paid attention to, because it kind of got ignored, is when you see the redistricting. I cannot say that. Let me take a sip out of this tea. I've been talking all day. Hold on. Redistricting. Why can't I say that? Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, two districts that are predominantly Black districts. One in Jacksonville, Florida, which pretty much is the blackest city in Florida, has pretty much been divided. This will kick into place in 2023. And what they've done is they've diluted two black districts and pretty much created them where they would be a more right-leaning district now. And this is not to jump into the Democrat, Republican, left, right conversation, but it's to highlight the fact that, again, voices are being silenced strategically in regards to what's happening in policy. So when they keep ranting about freedom of speech and our rights are being attacked, again, the ones who are the loudest are the ones pushing the policy. And all the policy is punitive. And again, all of this policy only benefits one specific collective of people, and it ain't the people that look like me. All right. And so, again, you just got so many things that's taking place. I am going to pause because I have said a mouthful. So let me catch up on the comments for a minute. And by the way, you know, it was so funny because I said something on Twitter about this yesterday. Something about, like, you know, the main folks ranting and raving about freedom of speech are the same ones that, you know, rush to put out the punitive policy when you get conversations of like the 1619 project or redlining or sharecropping or the nadir period or, you know, sterilizations, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's so funny because people would respond that don't follow me, and the first thing they would do is run and try to like tell me about what the Democrats are doing wrong. Like, oh, but you know, the Democrats, they're the ones that are I was like, I said nothing about any party. I just said what I said. And it's so interesting that anytime you see a black person talk politics, the first thing they want to do is try to make you defend the Democrats. That's not my job. Yes, I tend to vote along the lines of what Democrats align with, but I'm not registered with either party. I just vote for what makes sense. So it's so funny that people automatically assume that black people don't understand how politics work and that, you know, we're just blind Democrats and we just gonna go and parade for Kamala and Joe every single time. No, that ain't how this works. Some of y'all need to expand your scope on how you see black folks. Anyway, let me read some of the comments. I'm not going to be able to go all the way back up to the top and get all of them because we really did like a good 30-minute rant here. All right, so let me see. Airline Beeman, this is going way, way back, said she could perform for whoever she chooses to. Kanye got on his knees crying about how much he loves Trump. Snoop threatened violence against dark-skinned black women, but you support them. I hope that's not towards me. That's for the people that support them. But yeah, I think that was in response to the idea. That question, that was in response to when we were talking about like the whole cancel culture bit and just what's kind of been happening. And because I asked the question like, who's actually really been canceled? Because none of these people are being canceled that are canceled. So it just highlights, you know, people have their feelings about things and then they keep it moving. Somebody said, can we talk about how both sides of the conservative and liberal politicians are different sides of the same coin? I think with that, both sides, in my opinion, fight to maintain the status quo, but they just do it in different ways. You have a lot of liberals who think they are the good guys because they can tolerate being around other groups of people. And then you have the conservatives who are like, we just like things the way they are, and we don't want to have any change. And then you have these two groups fighting. I do think we have to get out of a space of wanting to align under different umbrellas. Like, I think people would get so much further in life if you didn't constantly align yourself specifically with a political stance or view. Like the idea, like I don't consider myself a liberal or a conservative or a what. I'm just me. If it makes sense to me, I'm gonna get behind it. If it don't, it is what it is. And like, because like I've said before, like the same way that people are fans of politicians now, I don't think that's a good idea. Where people like, let me tell y'all. So, my cousins and I, we were at the monuments this weekend. You know, if you live in DC, you never go to the monuments. If you live here, you just go when other people come to visit. And so there was this truck that had like a big F Biden sign, like big old F Biden. And what this guy did is he just circled around the area for like an hour so everybody could see his flag. And I was like, okay. And again, it goes back to like, I understand you don't like who's in office. I ain't crazy over him either, but if you're building your identity because you have such an allegiance to whoever else was in office beforehand, like your politics are kind of warped down because you've created this tribal space where, you know, the policy no longer matters. It's about ego and feeling and building a larger coalition that will fight for the idea of nothingness just to be right. And that's where we're at. And so the idea of like, specifically aligning with different groups, I just don't think it's a smart idea politically. Like, with, oh, we're liberal, we're conservative, we're whatever, you know, we're Democrat, vote this no matter what. Like, you need to look and read and research what these people are doing when they get in office. Because look at that New York mayor. Yeah, he's a Democrat, but pretty much everything he pushes and backs is very right wing conservative. He might as well just be a Republican. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's why I say, like with politics, the idea of just blindly following people doesn't align. And again, our politics are bought out. Everybody is bought out in this game. That's why I said I'd never have an interest in going into politics, because even the people who do mean well and want to do positive things, by the time they finally get into office, they're compromised half the time. And you even like with the McCarthy tapes that have come out, look how compromised these people are. You have this man on tape literally saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to tell Trump he needs to resign because he's stirred up all of this, stuff and so on and so forth. The tapes come out. He's going to sit there and say, that's not me. I didn't do it. Sir, you're on freaking tape. And then again, it's like all of these same Republicans who have played with the emotional viewpoints of their hardcore supporters that are really behind somebody like a Trump. These politicians in the GOP have played with that voter base, played on their stupidity. And I'm not calling the people stupid, but I'm saying as far as the idea of blindly following behind a politician and never even challenging any of their ideas. And again, this same energy goes for Joe too. Y'all know he ain't really my type like that. But you literally watch all these people flip the script behind the scenes. They see things one way, they believe one thing, but in front of us, they act another way. Again, trying to save their careers, trying to save their reelections, trying to not piss off their stakeholders and the people who have donated. And so they play these silly games. Because look at how the energy has shifted around January 6th, right? I'll come back to that in a minute because I'm not thinking about them yet. Anyway, Funny Child said, where's the Tony documentary? It's coming. It just took a minute, y'all. I got a lot going on. And those documentaries take a really long time to put together because you want to make sure your facts are right. And then once you finally record it, then you have to do all of the editing. The editing alone takes forever. I think I told this before, but when I did the Janet one, my MacBook died. Like it just died halfway, and I was 43 minutes into editing. Like that Janet one is like a 2-hour episode. I already had the first 43 minutes edited, and that alone took like 5 or 6 days to do. And so, yeah, these things take some time. But in addition to Tony, I've been working on some additional documentary type projects because I'm trying to restructure how I do this channel because I think I'm burning myself out with the way that I'm doing it now, which is why you've kind of seen a slowdown with the content I've been putting out. But yeah, there's a few additional things that are down the pipeline, so I can't wait to share those. Anyway, let me keep it moving. Oh, SF, you said it. You said it. All right. He said they have Obama, or they have Obama. That was like one of the main responses when a lot of people had reparations conversations. So when they asked Mitch McConnell, like, how do you feel about reparations for Black people? He said, Obama was a reparations. I said, no, Obama was the symbolism. Like I have my valid critiques of Barack Obama, but I also still understand that his election for a lot of people meant something from a standpoint of symbolism. It just highlighted that maybe there's a little hope for this country. Maybe it's not as terrible. We know it's about to be a storm of chaos for the next 4 or 8 years, but wow, we didn't think America would ever put somebody who even looked like him in office. And I said that before, like I remember watching the Chris Rock movie Head of State, and I remember thinking like, man, that would be so cool if we could have like a Black president, but that crap is never going to happen. Like that's how I never saw nothing like that happening in my lifetime. Now, your viewpoints on how he did, I still think as far as stabilizing the country and all that, I think he did okay. But I think in regards to maybe things that would have been a bit more tangible for the Black collective, there wasn't really a lot that was there. There are some things that are there, but it is what it is. Sadly, that comes with our politics. Anyway, but yeah, so they use Barack Obama as a symbolic gesture, and my biggest critique of him is he was so afraid of race, and it used to make me so mad because I think sometimes you just have to jump into things head on. I think when people know where you stand and you're not as flimsy or wobbly and you're a lot more stern, there's more of a respect for you. One of the most interesting things about this specific channel, especially since I've become a lot more direct over the years, I know we shake the table on occasion, and I know white people catch it on this channel all the time. But oddly enough, there's like this kind of respect where a lot of like white Americans who may not agree with me kind of just let me say my 2 cents and keep it moving rather than trying to argue me down because they're like, well, he's about his business, so let's go to somebody else. So they go in and drag somebody else who's trying to be friends with everybody. And this is not saying that I don't associate with anybody, but like when I'm having these conversations about we're getting down to business. I'm not in this for feelings. You know what I mean? And so I think had he been just a bit more intentional, it would have helped a lot more, I think, because the country jumped into the we're post-racial once he got elected, and everybody wanted to pretend that everything was fine now, and we're all just singing kumbaya, and we all just, it's just a free time and everything is great now. And I think that really damaged the progress that could have been made, because look what happened once he got out. You had this wave of rage from white Americans come in. And not only did it come to that, but they're in this space where they're going to make sure '08 and 2012 never happen again. And that's why you're seeing the redistricting. That's why I still said it wrong. Oh, that's why you're seeing what's happening with the voter restriction, everything under the sun to ensure that, those demographics who they fear will kind of, push the line and make it so another candidate who does not fit the status quo mold, even though to me, Barack Obama still fit that mold. And look how exceptional he had to be in order to be just half accepted, Anyway, hot mess. Let me keep going. Jaffe3 said, wasn't that Hurricane Gilbert? I might have the hurricanes mixed up. I know Hurricane Bertha was the summer. It was either the summer of 95 or 96, and I know it hit the Carolinas. It might have been both of them, to be honest. I'm trying to remember. Let me Google real quick. That's what our phones are for. That's what phones are for. Let's see. Hurricane Bertha, 1996. All right, so it was 96, July 5th through July 18th is when it hit the East Coast. I just remember it because I was in Savannah at the time, and we thought it was going to hit Savannah, but it passed us and went to the Carolinas. Savannah's always like really fortunate because of where the city's located. It's kind of like tucked in a little bit. So like, if this is the East Coast and the hurricanes are coming, like Savannah's like tucked in like here. So the storms always just come right here, and Savannah always gets spared, which is why they haven't really been hit by too many hurricanes. Anyway, I'm gonna read a few more comments and then I want to keep going. Sip my. Somebody said, you don't have to agree with Trump and Alex Jones, but them being removed from Twitter opened the door for the left to be censored as well. The problem with what happened with Alex Jones and Trump wasn't because their opinions didn't align with how people felt. You have Alex Jones, who, again, with the whole Sandy Hook thing, you have this man constantly taunting the families of Sandy Hook to the point where there's been a whole lawsuit. Now he has to pay these people all this kind of money. When you have people who constantly create movements that start violence, with a private company it's a publicly shared company, but it's a company. You know what I mean? It's not federally mandated. You don't want the liability of saying, okay, all of these people created all of these different, events that would lead to, people being harmed on your platform. That's why these people have been silenced. But at the same time, people on the left are constantly being shut out. And when it comes to Black activists, all of us are getting kicked off of everything if we're not already being assassinated or killed off. Like, look at what happened with all the original Black Lives Matter activists out of Ferguson that are all dead now. Okay, so when we're talking about freedom of speech, like, this is where I'm going. I can care less about feelings or who tweeted something. I'm talking about who's really being silenced. And in this country, those who are being silenced are being killed off when they talk about what's actually happening. That's really the conversation we're having. So, and somebody, again, Trump and Alex Jones are wealthy. Trump has his own platform. Didn't he build that or whatever? So again, I don't want to hear this conversation about like, oh, freedom of speech is being attacked, blah, 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 blah. Like, if it's going to be that, let's go across the board and really pay attention to what's really being shut down. The arguments that are being made about something like Twitter are about a social network. The arguments being made from my end are policy, things that are affecting academia, that are affecting the workplace, that are affecting conversations around housing, that are affecting funding for different programs that affect the people. That's the real issue. So, Elon will be fine with his billions. Trump will be fine with however much he claims to be wealthy with. You know what I mean? V Carter said, yeah, Rondo neighborhood in Minneapolis became the interstate. Going back to when I said pretty much most of the interstates built in the United States bulldoze over Black cities or Black neighborhoods in the city. Oh, y'all, and it's Hunter Biden laptop. Who cares about Hunter Biden? F him. Like, I don't know. Why do people, like, for some reason, why do y'all bring up, listen, I don't like Biden and crew. I'm tolerating them because they're in office. I don't know why y'all always want me to kind of defend Biden. That ain't my job. Him and Hunter or whatever they got going, that's some white people stuff with what they got going. I don't care. But y'all go ahead and investigate the laptop. You find something, do what y'all do. Who cares? Anyway. Jersey Candy said Atlanta suburbs continually to vote no on public transportation. That's kind of like what happened with DC and Georgetown. There's a reason why there's no metro station that goes to Georgetown. It stops at Foggy Bottom, and then you got to get on the bus, right? They said y'all ain't coming over here. And mind you, Georgetown was actually, that was the Black neighborhood before it was taken over. Once, and then I'm gonna talk about Georgetown University in a little bit when I talk about this Harvard conversation. Let's keep it going. I'm gonna scroll a little bit because we got to keep it moving. I'm sorry if I'm missing your comments. It's not on purpose. It's more so just I gotta keep it going. But I appreciate everybody who is engaging. Billy Flood, you said that exactly. He brought up the 1862 Homestead Act. Yeah, there's so many things in that have been signed into law that have disproportionately affected Black people from a negative standpoint. And this is why I don't spend too much time trying to engage with the whole conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican crap because Black people suffer under everybody. Under everybody. I do think Black people have a bit more leverage with the Democrat Party, but they got enough flaws that they need to work out. So yeah. Um, all right, I'm gonna keep going. Trying to keep going. All right, I'm just gonna keep it moving. And please forgive me if I skipped your comments. Oh, thank you. Somebody donated and I did not thank them. I'm sorry. Who did I miss? Um, Melody Nia, thanks for another great live. I always learn so much from you. Thank you. I'm not as researched today as I would like to be, but we're gonna keep it moving. Um, Billy Flood, you said it again. Your freedom of speech is only promised. About the government. Nowhere is your freedom of speech protected from your consequences. You're not protected from the consequences of your speech. That's really what this conversation is about. People just don't like the smoke that's coming to them when they say things that people don't like. If you dish it out, you should be able to take it. The same way I can sit here and be cussed out and called every kind of coon or whatever else when people don't agree with me. You should be able to do the same if you're a billionaire and you're starting all these different movements or doing whatever else that's happening that the people are not really in support of. Don't get mad because people called you out. Too many people are used to being coddled their whole lives because they lived their whole lives being seen as the standard, being seen as, the way to do things. And now that they recognize that that's not the reality and people kind of have smoke for them, they can't take it and it's eating them alive. You know what I mean? And another thing, let me tell you how stupid this is. I saw another tweet too where all these people were saying like Elon Musk is the first African American to own a social I was like, y'all play these stupid games so much. Now, Elon Musk is from South Africa, but he's a white South African. So no, you're not a real South African, first of all. Your people are colonizers. Y'all showed up, you got some Dutch lineage, most likely, showed up and took the land and everything, and then you ended up in America. So no, you're not African American. And everybody knows that the term African American was created specifically to marginalize and put Black folks in a box. And so now all of a sudden they want to play these kind of name games and pick and choose when all of a sudden they want to support African Americans. So you're telling me you only want to support them when they look a certain way. Cut the crap. Y'all think people are stupid playing in our faces. Gonna call him an African American. All right, tell him to say the N word and see how it goes. Anyway. Oh, this is an interesting comment. I like this. All right. 1 minute we say politicians are puppets, then we say Obama didn't do enough. Make it make sense. I think because I think multiple things can be true at once. The conversation around the puppet bit, and I don't think I've ever used puppet, but if I did, okay, either way. But the conversation around kind of being bought out goes to, again, when these people run for office, all these corporations start donating, and in return, there's something they're going to do to ensure that you know these companies get something. Now, going back to Obama, like I said, I think the good that came out of what he was able to do, he was able to pull us out of a recession. He was able to do a lot of things in regards to what was happening with green energy, what was happening with I'm trying to think of some. There's a bunch of different things, and there's a lot of these Supreme Court decisions. I think when people start talking about the critiques, a critique, like think about because even when you think about who his last Supreme Court nominee would have been, right? It was going to be Merrick Garland before the GOP was like, nah, we're not doing no more. Yeah, too close to an election year. Ain't nobody else coming in here. Merrick Garland, based on his politics, had he been able to get that seat, I don't see him as being someone who would have been a Supreme Court justice that would have really benefited a lot of marginalized groups because he straddles the fence. Like, look at how he's working in the Justice Department. He ain't doing nothing. You know what I mean? I think in regards to HBCUs, I think a ball was dropped with that administration where there should have been a better kind of set up for security around what was happening with HBCUs at the time. And he did what he could do, but he didn't. There's just so many things that could have been done. And a lot of it has to do with who you put in your cabinet and what it is that you support and endorse and what you get behind. And like I said, there's a lot of things that he was able to do, but he also sometimes would contradict that. So like my biggest beef and what made me start seeing him a lot differently was after Freddie Gray. Watching him do that press conference and call those kids thugs, it I was like, you know what that meant. You know that term is like a code word for white racists to justify how they see Black folks. You knew what that was about. And so when you jumped into that respectability thing, and you didn't really pay attention to the fact that Baltimore has been a city that has been changing. And when you talk about what triggered the protest, the kids were already protesting about what had happened at the time. There was an Orioles game that was getting out at the same time. The Orioles fans, as far as baseball, started taunting and trolling the kids because they thought it was funny. You know how that feels to be passionate about something and you're seeing people laugh in your face. That started to trigger the rage that was taking place, and then it leads into what happened next. And so, and then again, and it's even bigger than that because Baltimore is going through exactly what DC is almost coming out of, where you've gentrified the entire city, you destroyed people's neighborhoods. Kids, like if I talk about DC, you have kids who their entire neighborhood is gone. All their friends have been pushed out, and they might be the last one on their block. They've watched their city change and be rebuilt, and they weren't a part of it. They weren't included in it. And so you have all of those emotional standpoints there. And so, yeah, the people were over. And then again, when you see what happened with Freddie Gray, and then the video comes out, and there's all these cover-ups and everything, the people are going to be outraged. And so by him using that term, I was like, damn, Barack. That and the bombing the kids with the drones, I will never support that. I'm not a war person. I don't like the idea of blowing up things and killing people. And people are always like, oh, well, for us to have the things we have to have, we got to do some unpopular things. No, there's no justification for that. I'm sorry. And so with him, like I said, I think there's a lot of things he was able to do, especially with a lot of the big name, like Supreme Court rulings that happened under his watch, and some of the people he was able to put in outside of Merrick Garland. Like I think Justice Sotomayor is the saving grace right now on that Supreme Court. And, because there's a few things she's done I was not a fan of, but like most of her rulings have been in alignment with how I see things. And a lot of her rulings tend to be for the people. And so I think that was a good choice that he put in there. But I just think, again, multiple things can be true at once. I have my compliments for what he's been able to do, but I also have my critiques. And that's with anybody who's in office. I don't think any president is exempt from being told about themselves. Any politician, anybody who volunteers to serve the people, you are up for critique. No matter how likable you are, no matter how, I loved seeing I loved seeing Michelle and the black kids and the black dog and the mother. I loved all of it. But at the same time, it doesn't make anybody exempt from critique. Anyway, where are we at? I ain't even got to have my topics because you guys have left some really great comments on here. What up, Young Swag Money Entertainment? Let's see. All right, I'm gonna move on because I said that like 5 times and I still have not. All of this is done. I didn't want to talk about this. I'm gonna read a quick bit. Going back again when we're talking policy. Somebody donated again and I did not see. Thank you, Kendrick. Celeste, and keep up the knowledge, sir. Thank you. This is coming out of Detroit, right? And so this goes back to what I was saying in regards to when we're talking policy and things that come out that are detrimental to groups of people. This is what we're talking about. And so where's my little article here? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to get some pieces out of it. All right. The city of Detroit made an extraordinary admission about 5 years ago. It overtaxed homeowners by at least $600 million between 2010 and 2016. The illegal inflated property tax assessments resulted in an estimated 100,000 Detroiters, most of them black, losing their homes to foreclosure, right? The Michigan Constitution prohibits property from being assessed at more than 50% of its market value. Between 2010 and 2016, the city assessed properties at as much as 85% of their market value. This is what I'm talking about when I say that policy is what you need to be passionate about. Not feelings or what somebody said on Twitter or how it made you feel, but really the policy is what we have to pay attention to. Because again, 100,000 people pushed out. And why would you think that would happen? Like, let's talk about Detroit, right? So we have the economy go down in 07, 08, 09, 2010. What happens anytime anything crashes? People who have money do what you call, they buy into the dip. So if you're somebody who does like cryptocurrency or anything like that, anytime, Ethereum or Bitcoin or Dogecoin or all those things crash, all the people on Twitter are like, buy into the dip, buy into the dip. Why? Because they know that this is the time to buy into everything because it's really like dirt cheap and it's going to be worth a lot later down the line. The same thing with the stock market. When the stock market crashes, like everybody knows there's going to be a housing bubble burst that is looming. It may not loom and hit the same way that it did in 08 because now we're in a space where corporations are buying housing and we don't know how this is going to really affect, but we know something is coming. But when it does come, you're going to see people with money come and buy into the dip. And so this is what happened with Detroit. And it created a space where developers could come in, seize up all of this property, repurpose it, make a bunch of money off of it, hike up the prices so only a specific demographic of people who come from a certain amount of wealth can afford to live in the areas. And the people who are already there were pushed out through a legal policy, through taxes. And you know the IRS don't play about their taxes. I'm still cussing with how much I had to pay in taxes this year. And so again, and who's collateral? People that are working hard, people that are trying their best, people who stayed loyal to a city that pretty much lost their economy. Detroit, in my opinion, has always been an industrial city. And as we have come out of the industrial era and moved into a tech era and a more business-oriented era, a lot of cities have suffered. Cities like Pittsburgh, cities like Detroit, cities like Flint, Michigan, Lansing, Michigan. Where else can I say? Pretty much a lot of the cities that, again, they had St. Louis, right? Gary, Indiana, cities that were more so industrial. As our industry kind of collapsed and we outsourced jobs overseas, the people that stayed in these cities and tried to make it work were collateral. And a lot of the people that stayed because they couldn't get out anyway. There were no additional options. And so to overtax these people to where you have 100,000 people leave, what is it? What is the end result with that? Where do these people go? How does that affect their livelihood? How does that affect what it is that they've come to know as their reality? And so these are the things that you kind of have to think about in reality in regards to what's happening in life. And again, to this day, residents have not been compensated for losing their homes or paying more than they owed in property taxes. And again, let's talk about where did property taxes go as well. These are supposed to fund the schools. But again, when you have people in power that constantly want to keep gutting the school funding every 5 minutes because they need to fund the police department, or from a federal level, they need to fund the military, even with you paying all this money in the property taxes that's supposed to go to school, the money is not even going to the schools. It's going to everything else. The kids still ain't learning. And now even with the education, you're seeing this mass exodus of teachers and educators who are like, we're burnt out. We can't do it anymore. We're not being paid. We're being monitored with what we're allowed to teach. The town halls are literally, you almost got to have security because you got Americans showing up to the school board meetings with guns, with their AR-15s. Because again, when we talk about our politics being so tribal that people don't even pay attention to policy, they just want to fight. And now we're in a space where, it's come and take my gun. I want you to take it from me. People are obsessed with wanting to have the right to shoot somebody. They can't wait. They wait for every opportunity to pull out a gun. And so this is where we're at. And so, yeah, that was just very triggering to read that. And again, you just see so many things. And that's why even with these companies, when people start spending too much time trying to defend corporations and companies or governments, I just start looking at people sideways, because with any company, you can always find some foolery. You can find some shenanigans. Think about Walmart. Remember Walmart? It was found out that they had taken out life insurance and policies on 123 dead former employees, right? They called it like the dead peasants insurance, which is a horrible term to use. But literally, you have employees that died that worked there, and Walmart took out policies in the names of the spouses. And mind you, the spouses got nothing. The families got nothing, but Walmart got a payout. They no longer practice this because once it was kind of discovered, they're like, okay, we ain't gonna do it no more. So they stopped doing that around the year 2000. And I think some lawsuits came around 2007, 2008. But like a lot of these corporations have some shady business practices. A lot of them. Like I know some of you guys probably saw the documentary that was on Netflix about Boeing and those planes that they built. And knowing that you had this software that you would have to train and teach to different people in order to, in order for the plane to not literally crash, because really the software that they had installed in these 737s, it had something to do with the plane reading the tailwinds or something like that. And if the machine read something wrong, it would go into a nosedive. And so what ended up happening is in the United States, all the pilots got the training, all of them got the insight on how to utilize this. But overseas, that was not given because they didn't want to spend the money to train anybody. And they told everybody, no, these planes work exactly the same. Just go ahead and just fly. Take this big, giant, multi-ton vehicle, 37,000 feet in the air, and just go for it. And then you have two planes crash, right? And again, it was all about greed. It had nothing to do with safety. It had nothing to do with the quality of what's out there. It was greed. And you had hundreds of people die over some BS. And so now, literally I could go company by company and find something wrong with them. Like, man, don't get me started. I am going to pause and read a few more comments. Did I have any quotes from the Walmart bit? Yeah, let's see. The Florida, and now this is an old article, and at this point, the news has changed. But the Florida Supreme Court is deciding whether Walmart widowers can sue the corporation for a share of the life insurance policies Walmart purchased in their wives' names. They want some of the 9.6 million the corporation collected when the insurance benefits were paid. And see, my beef with that, first of all, Walmart's already trifling. Like, I think I told this story before, but like, I don't like how they treat their employees. So it's a story that I don't like to go to if I don't have to. But you know, as far as like, they don't like to give a lot of employees 40 hours, so they'll cut them off at 39 and a half hours. Like, I'll never forget going to that little raggedy Walmart over here on 8th Street here in DC. I literally was purchasing the items, right? I didn't want to go to this store, but there's literally in DC. There's two Targets and a few Walmarts. Those are your options. And the Targets are way on the other side of town for me. So I'm over here buying whatever I need to buy, and then out of nowhere, my cashier's like, "Oh man, you gonna be mad?" I was like, "Why? For what?" And he was like, "My cash register just locked me out because I'm at 39 and a half hours. I can't work no more, so it locked me out. I gotta go home." And I'm like, "Okay, so can you finish the ring up?" And he was like, "No, it turned off. I can't even log in. So you're gonna have to just go to another line." So I had to literally, mind you, half the stuff is in the bags, and it was still rolling down the little assembly thing. And it was like when it was rolling, the assembly thing just stopped. And then so I'm over here trying to take the stuff back. Then I had to go all the way back to the end of the other line because they didn't have enough cashiers that day. I'm like, really? And then the second time I went there, and that's why I said I'd never go to this one again. I bought my goddaughter some, like, I bought her this big giant I don't even know what I got. It was like a keyboard and something else. I always would, my little goddaughter, I would always buy her like a toy every time I would go visit her because they live further out in Virginia. So I was like, let me stop at Walmart, get something for her. I knew it was some BS when I went there. I don't know why I went there, but I go in there, go to self checkout. That specific day, there are no bags at the self checkout, and the self checkout machines are not printing receipts, right? And so I talked to the woman who's standing that kind of monitors, and I'm like, hey, every time I go to this Walmart, something happens. Like when I purchased this, can you vouch to the people that are working the door that I paid for these items on my way out? Because this is not printing a receipt. There's no bag. So it's going to look like I just walked out the store with items. And the lady's like, "Oh, baby, I'd love to help you, but I'm not allowed to leave my spot." I'm like, what kind of slavery is this thing? Ma'am, it's like 10 steps over. You can even just stand at the end and just wave and point to me. And so she couldn't help me. And so, of course, what happened? As soon as I get to the lady, and I was trying to talk before excuse me, they sent me to security, had me in the back like I'm stealing and everything. I'm trying to explain to them like, y'all machines don't got no, you didn't pay for that. I was like, run the camera, do something, but I was just there. I even pulled out like my phone and tried to pull up the bank app, and the bank app showed that I had just purchased all of these items, but the bank app just had midnight as the time. For some reason, this was the key bank app. It didn't have the correct time. It just said midnight. And the lady was like, you got that at midnight. It's 3 something something in the afternoon. And I'm like, ma'am, since when have y'all been open at midnight? Y'all close at like 9 or 10 o'clock. It clearly says today. Hot mess. Eventually, somehow a receipt got printed at the customer service side on it. It was like a whole 30-minute ordeal. Getting back to my point, though, these corporations will nickel and dime to try to get the most that they can out of their laborers. And so I won't even fault the lady who's working, the thing that stopped me, because I recognize that she probably got to stop a whole lot of people every 5 minutes. So I understand. But, her energy is the energy of somebody who's burned out working in a place where they're always taken advantage of. The lady who couldn't go with me, the fact that she's not even allowed to walk to a different segment of the store, which would still be in sight to where she was at because she's not allowed to leave her station. Like, this is what's happening with these corporations, and no, blah hoopla, they ain't apologize for nothing. I was like, F all of y'all. They just were looking at me like this. I was like, I'll fight everybody in here. I was so mad. Anyway, let me read some comments. I was hot. So F Walmart. I can't stand that store. What is this? What is this? Hot? Didn't we talk about these porn people? Listen, hot girls and boys video chat. Listen, unless I'm starting to OnlyFans, the only porn that's gonna be up on this channel will be whatever I put out. So y'all stop trying to market y'all stuff on my channel, okay? And I won't be making any. So, all right, let me go ahead and just let's see. There we go. Okay. Anyway, let's see here. Um. Pete Buttigieg, Pete Buttigieg did the same thing in South Bend, Indiana, to gentrify black neighborhoods. Like, what you're seeing is happening everywhere, everywhere. And the worst part is a lot of these people who are moving to these cities, they're only coming for a few years, and they're gonna, build their careers, and then they're gonna go back home to what's home for them. You know what I mean? And then when they leave, the investment leaves with them. The schools go back to not getting funding. And mind you, have these people, their kids aren't in the schools anyway. Their kids are going to schools outside of these specific neighborhoods. But when they leave, in comes the divestment. In comes, we're going to change the bus routes. We're going to change the accessibility to certain services. We're going to change how much effort we put into certain grocery stores. Think about how different the grocery stores are depending on what side of town you live on. Depending on where you live, if you're on in a side of town where there's a bit more money, I mean, you got the best produce, and not even that, you get the stuff that's imported. You get, they got star fruit, you know what I mean? They got dragon fruits, stuff you didn't even know existed. They got yellow kiwi. All right, then you go to that other grocery store on that other side of town. You might be lucky to get some bananas if they ain't already browning. You know what I mean? Um, let's keep it moving. Oh, nerd large. Listen, I'm where you were at. I was still holding on to faith. They said they had started losing respect for Barack after the Slipgate Spears summit. If you remember, that was when Henry Louis Gates was stopped in his neighborhood by like the security officer or the cop, and they didn't believe that he lived there. And so it kind of made news headlines. And so Barack's idea was, let's have a sit down and discuss this over a beer and kind of, this should ease the tension. And so for me, his intentions were, he recognizes that we got an issue with race here, but he's going to try to do the respectability thing. And let's just all be friends. And in reality, you can't be friends with everybody. When there's things that are more so systemic, it's not about feelings. And so it was a very watered down attempt to try to ease the situation. And really, I understand it was for political points. It's politics. That's how it works. But it got nothing resolved. The cop would not budge and would not change his viewpoint on anything. And that's why I'm like, you cannot straddle the fence and try to be friends with everybody. People need to know where you stand on something. And it is what it is. Either they rock with you or they don't. And if they don't, who cares? There's 330 million people that live in this country. I'm not worried about you if you and I are not on the same page on everything. Cool. It is what it is. Next, and so that's where we're at. But I have met him about 2 or 3 times. I'll be honest. He's very likable in person. I've met him a few times. But yeah. Rochelle said, way too trigger happy. Yeah, we're in a space where everybody just wants to shoot everybody. And then it's so funny because the same ones who come and take my gun and think about all the politicians who run and they don't even have a platform. They just make an ad with a gun and shoot up something. Brian Kemp, when he ran for governor of Atlanta, 2018, his political ad was shooting a truck. I like my guns. Nobody's gonna take them. Lauren Boebert, when she was running for office, walking with her gun. I'm getting ready to go and shake up things in Washington. I'm like, what you about to come up here and do? Because we already got, DC got strict gun laws. So what you about to come up here and do? Like all of these politicians, they run no policy, just checking my guns. And if you want my gun, come and take it. Like y'all want to shoot people so bad, but then let it be something that happens with like police brutality or something. Then the first thing they want to do is bring up black on black crime and weaponize black people who have weapons. Or anytime a black person is shot and killed by the police, they want to say, well, he had a gun. Okay, well, you just was saying, come and take yours. He just had his in his car. He didn't even take his out. What's the issue? Y'all are supposed to be so pro Second Amendment, but it seems like the Second Amendment only protects white folks. I had to have a heart-to-heart with my younger brother one time where because he's military and all the other stuff like that, he has access to weapons and he used to like to carry his pistol and he was going to Walmart. I was like, Negro, no, you're not. Not with that. You need to pay attention to Crawford, who got shot over in Ohio, literally walking with the BB gun that was in the store. And you see the police come in and just shoot right away. He had 3 seconds to even process what was being told to him, and he's dead. I was like, I understand that you think that because you're in the military, all of a sudden you're going to be respected. You might need to go back and pay attention to how black military vets have been treated in this country. That is not going to exempt you from anti-blackness and white supremacy. So it's a very stupid thing to be in a majority white town and go into a store with a gun on your hip. Absolutely not. So he was mad, but he had to understand, absolutely not. Even with the kids I work with, they like to play with those little Orby toy guns, which I'm not a fan of. But one kid wanted to spray paint his black because they're orange. And I said, sir, that's not a good idea. And mind you, he's like 7th or 8th grade. So, if the police can think that Tamir Rice was an adult, they certainly can think that this kid was an adult. And I'm like, you guys got to understand, you live in an area where, there's high intensity things taking place in regards to, people all constantly being gunned down by police or being, brutalized. So you have to use common sense and discernment. And I hate that I have to take away and chip away at the innocence that's left of you or left for you. But you have to be, you have to be a realist and look at how the world is operating. This is not the time to kind of want to do certain things. My mother, as a child, or when I was a child, she never let me have any kind of toy guns for that exact reason. I couldn't even have a super soaker. That's how deep it was for her. So yeah, that's where we're at. I was supposed to be tired. Y'all done hype me up. I'm like on a high right now. I'm sized up right now. Um, Thank you, AJ6140. It was a stabilizer for the new engines they put on hold for the model planes. That was in regards to our conversation around Boeing. I couldn't remember exactly what happened. Thank you. Um, Somebody said, "Who put me in timeout?" It ain't me. Y'all see me. I was over here talking. Um, Only thing I put in timeout was that little porn group, whatever they was doing. I told you, ain't nobody gonna be putting porn on my channel unless it's me. And all right, let me see. Did I see something about Pearl Harbor? I think I missed it. But speaking of Pearl Harbor, you guys realize there were two Pearl Harbor attacks? We only hear about the one. And the other thing, like when you hear about Pearl Harbor, we always just hear about Hawaii, but they also attacked Manila, but that's never a part of the conversation. Like there's so many things that are always left out of our little conversations, but it is what it is. That's why I always say, like, really dig. I always tell the kids I work with and their parents, yeah, you're gonna get the education that you get from school, but you have to go and do additional like searching. You have to go and find additional books. If you're only depending on what you get out of school, you're not learning enough. I always tell people when I got out of Howard, I was an idiot. I learned so much, but because I had not lived yet, I still didn't know anything. Yeah, I got this really great formal education. And for me, it's like the Howard education didn't kick in until years after. That's when everything started to like align and make sense. But you have to constantly have a desire to grow and a desire to learn in whatever it is. It doesn't always have to be history. My thing is I love to talk history and politics and race. But if your thing is science or nature or food or whatever it is, you want to constantly work on yourself, because the minute you choose to stop learning, you've limited yourself, because the world is going to continue around you, whether you're a part of it or not. And so your best bet is to always kind of be in the loop with what's happening around you. All right. Say yes. Joya said, "I'm here in Florida and I can't stand this place." I hate that so many places that have the most punitive policy against Black people tend to be the places that have the largest Black populations. I hate it. I hate that so many politicians are really just, again, we have so many people who have ended up becoming collateral because the leadership just wants to be in a position to be right at the expense of their own constituents. And I think that's such a horrible thing, even with healthcare. The fact that all those states refused to expand Obamacare because they didn't want anything associated with the man, and like you literally, it limited what was available for people who would have needed it. It's just like these people are so stupid. Um, anyway, oh, my bell said, "Not the A Street Walmart." Woo child, I'm glad you know. And then the Walmart is small. Like the aisles are like this wide. You can't even push a cart in. You get here like trying to look like you bunny hopping, trying to get down in Walmart, because it's just the Walmart. That's like a southern thing. But the Walmart, because the aisles are so small, they pretty much built it inside of like this older building that was like a warehouse or something. So it's just like, oh, I can't stand that store. Oh, get my blood pressure. Oh, thank you, Tracy Delgado. Look up a book called The Federal Mafia. It's not only certain businesses taking out insurance policies. Yeah, it's a whole lot of stuff going on. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Nikita Clark said a lot of companies used to do life insurance schemes. It was legal in quotes back then until people found out about it. Like there's just always some kind of business practices. It's kind of like when we gas up people who claim to be self-made billionaires and millionaires, and then you find out their parents gave them a $300,000 loan to start their business, or their parents were the CEO of a company, or their parents or their family owned a freaking mine in South Africa that oppressed and killed a whole bunch of people, and then the residual money is what built their wealth. You'd be like, oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Bootstraps, huh? All right. Somebody asked, "Am I going to?" Sorry, wrong pipe. Promise it ain't COVID. Hmm. Somebody asked, "Am I going to the something in the Water Fest?" Because they announced that it's going to be here in DC. Um, Maybe, I'm not sure. It's a pretty good lineup. Like, when I was looking at the lineup, let me see here, because they had some really good people on there. Did I save it? I don't know if I saved it, but I know some of the people that were on there were like Chloe and Holly. who I like their work. Duckworth was on there. I like his stuff a lot. Tyler the Creator, I like his stuff a lot. Um, who else was on there? There was a whole bunch of folks. So I might get some tickets. It depends how comfortable I am. I don't like being in big crowds in DC just because DC is already like this kind of a target city for stuff to happen. And I'm not trying to put that in the universe, but I don't like to be in large crowds here at least. But I think at the same time, it'll probably be heavily guarded and protected because of its location. But after watching the nonsense with January 6th, I was like, oh, y'all ain't doing what I thought y'all were doing around here. Okay, I guess. All right, let me keep it moving here. All right. Um, Marcellus Rowe, Calvin, I messaged you on IG and the screenshot of me being in timeout by you or your moderator. It literally says that on the message. Check your IG. I haven't put anybody in timeout. Whatever happened, it's the moderator. I've been talking. Like I said, I don't have the energy to block and mute people. If you say what you say, you say what you say. I'm not pressed. Because I don't mind a little engagement. The only time I'm gonna block anything is like if it's spam, and usually I'm not doing it because I'm ranting and raving. So I don't know what happened, but all right, you're here now. All right. Let's keep it moving. Princess RLM, have you talked about the Oklahoma abortion ban? No, with no exceptions. I have not, but I did read about what was happening with that. And again, what happened in Oklahoma, to me, all of this is an extension of what happened in Texas. Texas had a law, I think it was called like HB2 or something like that. And this was in the early 2010s, right? There's a woman named Dawn Porter who has a documentary. What is that documentary called? That you guys can all check out. Um, she has a documentary called, damn, what is it called? I can't, Trapped. All right, it's a documentary called Trapped. And what the documentary highlights is the struggles that people go through to try to find, reproductive health care in a place where the laws keep changing, because Texas has been like kind of gutting that for years and years. And this is not a conversation about whether or not you support abortion, but it's a conversation about the fact that, again, our politics are not based on the people. It's kind of just talking points and political points and ego. And so you have, like, in that documentary, I remember there was like a young girl who had been raped, right? And she was pregnant and she was not eligible to get the services in that specific state, because they pretty much created a law where the few clinics that were there, they had to have what you call access rights to like ambulance and hospitals and stuff like that. And so I think that specific location that she tried to go to didn't have it. They couldn't perform it, and there were only at the time I think 3 or 4 clinics left in the state in general, or something like that. And so she drove miles and miles and still couldn't get it, and she ended up having to have that child. And I think she was only like 14 or 13 years old and stuff like that. And so again, some of these policies that are being put out there are cruel. And again, this is your viewpoints on reproductive rights are yours to have. But what you're seeing these very almost like just cold hearted kind of things where even now, even when it comes to possibly being in a space where if delivering this child puts the mother's life in danger, you're even seeing legislation being pushed where nope, doesn't matter. You still got to have the child. Like that's where we're at right now. Very kind of just, I don't know, all over the place. Um, Avocado said thoughts on Christian Toby, the black dude who hated, bashed black women and was stabbed to death by his white blonde girlfriend. Um, um, I guess what I could say to that is, for me, it hurts that so many of us have such warped views of us, if that makes any sense. Because you see so many people who really, a lot of times, and usually that means they have no sense of self. They have no sense of how history is operated. They have no sense about who they are collectively and as a people and in regards to their own culture. And so a lot of people aspire to assimilate into whiteness. Like I say, a lot of people strive to be white, even if they got black skin. They strive to have everything that what white Americans have. And a lot of people also strive to appear to be cultured. And for a lot of people, their perception of what is cultured is everything that's anti-black. Um, I think I told this story one time. I was at Target with a friend that does the Target in Columbia Heights. This is when I was still an undergrad, and so there was like a black guy that was working at the Pizza Hut, and so he got some pizza. He had an attitude for some reason. So my friend had on like a Howard hoodie or a sweatshirt, and they just kept giving us this really bad energy. We're like, "Is something wrong? Did we do something?" My friend was like, "Is it the sweatshirt?" And they were like, "Yeah." I was like, Okay. And he was like, I go to Georgetown. It's like, okay, that's nice. And he was like, how many languages do you speak? It was like, one. I'm working on my third. And I was like, okay, but you also making pizza. So like humble down. And that's not to try to be like classes or anything, but it just highlights like for that individual, he felt that, he went to this, Georgetown is this big giant institution that's very, elite and has this very successful alumni and everything like that. And so he felt like, okay, for some reason these random 2 Howard students with the Target, I'm gonna try to tear down anything that they, and mind you, we did nothing. We were nice, we were cool, we were having a conversation about whatever we were having a conversation about. We just wanted some pizza. And so here he comes and I'm working on my third language. And it's kind of like, but if we want to go deeper than that, like hell, if we weren't already snatched up and enslaved, there were already going to be additional languages we would have already been able to speak. And so on and so forth. But again, that idea of white accolades putting you in a space to be cultured. It's kind of like black people who are like, I don't listen to rap music. I only listen to like, and mind you, I'm not really a rap head like that, but I'm not a person who's like, oh, rap isn't real music or R&B isn't real music. I only listen to the best of the best. And then everything that's the best of the best is a bunch of white people stuff. And again, we made all the genres anyway, so it's still all black music. But you have a lot of people who are just in a space where their definition of being cultured is being closer to whiteness, whether that's how they see the world, whether that's their politics, or whether that's who they choose to marry or love or anything like that. And I'm not telling people who to date and whatever, but as far as this specific individual, because I did see the tweets that were there, because he is no longer here, I'm not going to speak ill, but I think people have to understand that you still live in a world of anti-blackness. There, you can't buy your way out of anti-blackness. You can't be likable to a space where you're going to be exempt from any form of anti-blackness that comes your way. So I want better for us. I want better for people who have some of the viewpoints that they have. You're entitled to feel how you feel, but I do want better for people. I want people to really like have a sense of pride, because I'm like, I'm sorry, I wake up every day glad that I am who I am and where I'm from. Like, I thank God I'm black. Thank you, Lord. Man, I don't want to be anything else. Sorry, I wouldn't want to be like, man. If reincarnation is real, just let me come back as like an elephant. If I can't come back as a black person, just let me be an elephant or a squirrel or something. I'll take that. I don't want to be anything else. Anyway, um, he said, "No shade to Pizza Hut." Now, Pizza Hut be hitting with the little deep dish pizza. I'll take them over Papa John's. I haven't had them in a really long time. I like and pizza. That's the pizza I go up for. But yeah, it was just weird. Because it was like we did nothing. We're like, hey, how you doing? Can we get something? And he just had a whole attitude. We're like, did we do something? And then they were like, is it my sweater? Because I go down. Yes, I go to Georgetown. Which I'm so okay, good for you. And they also used to be a university that had slaves on campus. And one of the main reasons why they were able to stay afloat was because they sold off slaves in order to have money to pay off the real estate. But good luck. Anyway, um, go Hoyas. And those do go to Georgetown. No disrespect. I'm just saying that's y'all history. All right. All right. I want to keep moving because I'm so far behind on this. This is gonna be really, really quick. Somebody had asked me the whole Mike Tyson thing with him on the plane. There was a clip a few days back where it shows this dude that's taunting him on the plane, and then you end up seeing him like lay the dude out on the plane. I hope everything works out for Tyson, because what I first thought about is, with boxers, they have to register their fists. So I'm hoping he doesn't get into more trouble around that. But like I said, even in regards to like the Will and Chris Rock thing, folks got to leave people alone. Like, stop bothering people. And who's stupid enough to troll Mike Tyson? Just because he's no longer the heavyweight champ of the world doesn't mean he still doesn't have that power behind that fist. And like, I would not want to be punched by an out of shape Mike Tyson either. Have you seen how huge that dude? His hands are like, okay, this is the worst possible example that I'm going to use, so forgive me. But do you guys remember the Mad TV episode where it was like they were doing like an Oprah parody, and they had the thinning camera, because they used to always make fun of Oprah gaining weight on the show, but like on that episode, they had it set up where they had a thinning camera. And so when Oprah would see herself in the monitor, the camera would take off all the extra weight, and she was skinny Oprah. But then in real life, she was the bigger Oprah. And so there's a scene where she passes the guest a glass of water. And so it shows the skinny cam. And then when it goes off the skinny cam, it's this big giant hand that's like this big that's giving him the water. Like that's Mike Tyson's hands. Okay. Like, that's somebody I would not want to smoke with. And then you're in a plane. There's nowhere to run to. You can't run anywhere. Like, what if he like and Mike Tyson is pretty like here. He's usually pretty easy going. Like, what if he would have been in a rage and got up and ready to just pound on you? You have nowhere to go. And nobody's gonna help you because who wants to square up with Mike Tyson? Not I, said the cat. Like, man, and I just think people need to leave folks alone. He's already dealt with enough. He's had to bury one of his children. There's so many things that's happened to him in his personal life. He had a really, really hard childhood, which is one of the reasons why he ended up kind of being in a space where he liked to be around pigeons all day. He felt like he could understand the pigeons that fly. They understood him. You know what I mean? That was kind of his space. Stop bothering people, let alone on a plane. Like, so that dude got exactly what was coming to him, and that's what he gets. I hope he don't bother nobody else. Like, stop bothering people. And then somebody was asking about the whole Omarosa thing. You know that Trump has pretty much been ordered. I think the Trump campaign has been ordered to pay like Omarosa $1.3 million. Remember, she came out with a book. And mind you, I feel some kind of way about anybody who worked under that administration coming out with a book. But while they were there, they didn't do anything to stop the shenanigans. They just let it all happen. And then they got material for a book to write about it. But anyway, she came out with the book. Apparently, she had an NDA that she had signed, but it was not really honored by the courts. Or pretty much Trump and crew sued because she came out with the book. In the court of law, they were like, no, this NDA doesn't really carry a lot of weight with what it is that you're doing. You guys need to pay her and pay her legal fees. I don't think Trump is going to give her that money. Trump don't be paying nobody. He's going to be like, he'll find a way. He'll just appeal and do whatever he does. But again, that Omarosa still annoyed me with all of that because she tried it. I understand she was trying to do her own climb up, but it was interesting that when it all ended, then all of a sudden she went on the press trail and was like, oh, I'm here to help my people. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, right. Okay, Omarosa. And I remember like when she got fired, I think it was the Christmas party. She went there and the badge didn't work, so she couldn't get into the party. I was like, imagine not being able to get into a party that was already dry. Because they weren't in there cranking with nothing. The music was already dry. And this is around the time we had gotten to the space with the taking the knee and all the patriotic stuff. And I remember there was a moment where like former president had said something like, oh, well, we love the country and we stand for the flag. And at our party, we're going to sing patriotic songs at our party. It's like, ooh, that party's going to be dry. Who would want to go to that? So imagine you can't even get into that party. I feel some kind of way too. Like, dang, y'all music ain't even cranking and I can't get in. But yeah, so she played the game well. I guess good for you at the expense of your people, but collect your money, I guess. Not all money is good money, but I would definitely get that money out of that situation. So good for her in regards to that context, but I'm still disappointed that she even played into those games because there's a lot of foolery that she jumped into while she was in that role. So it's like you lost any credibility you ever had with me after that. And it's not even about because you worked with Trump. Again, I'm not a loyalist to any party, but the shenanigans that took place while you were there, I'm just like, okay, that's you. Do you. All right. It makes me think back to when she was on The View and she was like, yeah, we're getting ready to put together our African American History Month program. And then that same week is when Trump was like, I'm going to send the National Guard to Chicago because it's just out of control. If y'all don't know how to act, I'm sending the National Guard out there for y'all. Like, what? All right. Is that the Black History Month program? Okay. Anyway, I never got to Megan Tory. This is not going to be long because I'm not that interested in this. Going back to my speech about I want people to do better and I want better for people, it kind of ties with this Meg Thee Stallion and Tory Lane situation as well. I will say I don't think it was wise for her to do a TV interview while the case is still going in court. Like, I think it would have been smarter to let the trial play out, and when it's all said and done, then do your interview. Because let's say everything aligns in her favor. If he wants to appeal and say, well, the jury would have been influenced because there's all these media blitz promotions and everything that could have swayed the jury, I want a retrial or vice versa. I just don't think doing a primetime interview at that moment in time was a wise idea. But what I also don't like is I don't like that I've seen, mind you, none of us were there, but you have so many who have made it their life's dedication to paint and put out narratives that they know nothing about because, again, they weren't there. Nobody was there. We only know what has been presented to us. And so it's interesting to see how dedicated people are to not even just the case, but the trolling that goes behind it. I saw DJ Academic say the bit about, oh, well, Meg, she slept with 30 people. What does that have to do with the actual incident that took place? We have to get out of the habit as well. Like, we already know that in history, there's already been a history of over sexualizing or hypersexualizing Black women and making them almost beastly, right? In the past during the era of slavery. And something like academics talking about, oh yeah, she slept with 30 people. Who cares? It's just sex. Everybody has it. Be happy. Maybe you ain't been with 30 folks, so you feel some kind of way. But again, for me, it was like, that has nothing to do with anything. If you guys want to argue about the case, let's talk about what it is that we know with the case. And so we'll see what happens as all of this unfolds. I know that Tory had been, I know his like bail was, or he had been like what, held in contempt of court for, I guess, talking too much or something like that. And he's back out on bail and everything else like that. But I think both parties should just let things play out in the courts, even though the judicial system's already some BS. But I think they need to let it play out in the courts. I think, and I understand why Meg would want to do press, because again, it's weird because she's been getting dragged through the mud this whole time. So I understand she wants to clear her name and let people understand her perspective, but I think it would have been wiser to do it once the trial was over. Because again, I think you just have to get into a space where you don't feed the trolls. That's I'm at. Like for me, I personally think Tory shot her. That's how I feel. I feel like he shot her. And that is what it is. You ain't got to agree with me. It is what it is. But I feel like he did it. And I just think it's something that happened in the heat of the moment. And they had whatever they had going. And it is what it is. And here we are. But I think, and that's me. I wasn't there, like I said, so I can't put that out there. It's one of the reasons why I have not really spent a lot of time talking about this. I'll let the other YouTube bloggers that really spend their time on celebrity culture and gossip handle that, because this is not my forte and my lane of conversation. But I want better for us. I think when things happen within our collective and within our community, we have to be in a space where we have to at least just have an open ear to hear and see what it feels like to be on the other side, as opposed to constantly literally starting movements to try to end people. So we'll see where all that goes. But I really don't like DJ Academics. It's not even about the Megan Tory. He's just irritating anyway. I don't know how he has a platform. He's just irritating. Like everything about that dude is irritating. And he runs around like he's the smartest. And I heard what he said about Black Americans too. You think you're slick. All right, I'm getting tired of folks coming over here. You want to ride Black Americans' coattails, and then you want to shit on us at the same time. Sorry for cussing. That'd be pissing me off. Anyway, moving on. This is a more happy thing. I'm tired of talking about bad stuff. There is an SWV biopic that is in the works, and I think this is an exciting idea. SWV is a group that I think a lot of people don't know a lot about. They know the music, but a lot of people don't really know the behind the scenes with them, myself included. And so I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it. That is one of my favorite groups. And it's interesting how you start to appreciate different acts years later. Like when they were out when I was a kid, they were cool, but I think I was so into like TLC. I never was really, really huge on SWV until I got to high school. Like I just kind of, my dad gave me all his CDs when I was a teenager. And so I would go back and listen to all those CDs. And I remember like pulling out the It's About Time album and remembering my parents playing it in the car when I was little. And then I kind of go back and listen to it. And of course you're older, so your ears have matured and you have a different appreciation. And I just think they're such an amazing group. Lily was my favorite. I thought she was so fine when I was a kid. I thought she was so fine in the You're the One for Me video. Like Lily was everything to me. Yeah, everything to me. Like that was Lily. But they have so many great songs. Like Rain, I think is probably one of my favorites. But even their newer music, I think they have a beautiful cover of Patti LaBelle's If Only You Knew. I love their song Do Ya, which samples Rufus, Do You Love What You Feel? I love that song. They have the song Better Than I that I like. They have a real, and then of course when they came out with Cosign, when they dropped the I Miss This album, such a gem. I love that group. So I can't wait to see what happens with their biopic. Speaking of girl groups, and y'all gonna fight me on this, I was starting a few fires on Twitter because I was talking about it in Vogue. I know probably all of you are going to disagree with me, but I do not care. I personally think In Vogue's Runaway Love was their best single and video. Well, actually, I think Free Your Mind is their best video, but Runaway Love is my favorite In Vogue single. I wish Maxine had a verse on it, but I really think that's their best single. And everybody was fighting me on Twitter about it, and I'm not budging. I said what I said. It's a good song. Like it's so timeless. It's aged so well in 2022 and it still fits. And it's so interesting because when Runaway Love was out when I was a kid, I used to never listen to it. But for some reason, I don't know, I listened to it when I was like 20 and it hit. And I was like, this song is so good. I think just because I love a smooth groove. And don't get me wrong, I love their other singles. You know, Never Gonna Get It and Giving Him Something He Can Feel and Don't Go and You Don't Have to Worry and Lies is a good one. I love their Showtime at the Apollo performance of Lies. Terry was eating that song up. And Maxine. I love all of their singles, even their newer stuff. I love Too Gone Too Long. I liked Whatever. I liked Rocket. I liked, what was it? Ooh, it was off the Soulflower album. I like all their stuff. They're one of the few groups where I got all their albums. I even got Masterpiece Theater. All right. But Runaway Love is my song. I'm not budging. Y'all can fight me. I don't care. It's kind of like even with Janet. I always said, to me, her best slow jam is the original version of 24 Play. I Get Lonely, and anytime any place are a close second and third, followed by Let's Wait a While. But 24 Play, the original version, not the remix version, and the remix version is the one you see on the music video, but the one that is on the original release of Design of a Decade. It's like this beautiful, like 5.5 minute song that is just so smooth. She's in really good voice. It's one of her best vocal delivery. I love that song. I think that's her best little slow jam ballad, and she has a lot of them, so it's hard to decipher and dig through. But I'm not budging. I said what I said. You can fight me in the comments. It's not up for discussion. Anyway, I was gonna talk about McCarthy and these little stupid tapes, but honestly, I don't care. You know, like, because all of these people who have got caught up in all of this craziness in regards to January 6th or trying to overthrow the election, nothing has happened to most of them. A lot of the people who went and did the violent things at the Capitol got slaps on the wrist. So I'm just like, I'm not invested. I'm not that pressed. Now, I do know that a grand jury is convening on Monday in regards to what Trump was doing in Georgia as far as trying to find 11,000 votes. I know that grand jury convenes on Monday, and I know that the New York grand jury for whatever else he has going, he got so much. You got a lot of stuff going on, man. That grand jury is supposed to wrap up on Tuesday, so there's a whole lot going on. But again, there's just a lot of these folks are doing all kind of crazy things, and nothing happens. It's kind of like when we talked about the guys that tried in Michigan that tried to kidnap the governor, and then after all of that, the whole plot. I mean, they got bombs. They were going to blow up bridges and all this other stuff. 2 of them get acquitted, and 2 of them have the mistrial. I'm just like, y'all just get away with everything. All right. But let me run one of them camera lights. The way they already have the bill at your house in 10 seconds. Be ready. Be ready to lock you up for any and everything. All right. We get locked up for everything, and folks just get to do whatever they want. Hot mess. All right. Going back to some more positive news, Morris Brown College finally has their full accreditation. We talked about it some months back, and if you remember, Morris Brown has been going through a lot for a really long time, for almost 20 years, where they lost their I cannot freaking talk today. Accreditation. They lost their accreditation some years back. There was a lot of like embezzlement going on. The funds were a little shaky, and sadly, like a lot of students ended up leaving the university, and a lot of them transferred to other schools in the AU. So they might have transferred to like Morehouse or Spelman if they could, or Clark or other schools in the country. And remember, Morris Brown at one point in time was one of the premier HBCUs in the Southeast Atlantic region. And so I'm really happy that they are back and that they're going to be able to thrive. And so again, that's why I say support your HBCUs. And even when we have the conversation of, because I know a lot of people have the conversations of HBCU versus PWI, aka predominantly white institution. I've always said Black voices are needed in both realms. We're needed at both institutions. Of course, we're needed at HBCUs for obvious reasons, but even at PWIs, Black voices and voices from other groups of people are needed because universities already operate through a lens of whiteness, specifically PWIs. And so when you don't have enough representation, and when I say representation, I'm not just saying tokens, I'm not just saying a face in the crowd, but I'm saying people who come from a specific collective, a specific culture, they represent and defend and fight for that culture, and they advocate for that culture into different spaces. That is what is needed at these institutions. It's one of the reasons why we see so much of the foolery that we see today, because they like to use a little bit of tokenism when they need to meet a quota and throw Black folks into a space. And so we're needed at both. You know, when you have, I'll always be proud that there's a kid named Khalil Green. He's not one of my old kids, but he's in that same field that I worked in. And so he and I had a few run-ins here and there back in the day. But like, not like back in the day as far as like events and stuff that we were hosting, but you know, he's this Black kid from this area who ended up becoming, you know, the freaking president of, was it Harvard or Yale? I always forget. Let me make sure I got it right. Khalil Green, Yale. right? So he literally became the president of Yale, their first black president. And what's commendable about this young man is that like he understands how things operate and he advocates in that realm and in that lane. Like that's the kind of energy that you need in those kind of spaces. And it's not just in academia, but it's also in the real world as far as the workplace and just in society. You need different voices and different backgrounds and people from different spaces in order to make this whole United States thing work. They want to keep painting this idea of us being a melting pot, but this melting pot is centered in whiteness. So none of the ingredients were put in the pot except for whiteness, and all the other ingredients are on the sides. They never got to go in the pot and get simmered and cooked and get the extra flavor added in. Okay, all of the extra groups with the flavor. Okay, so you got to add that to the pot. So kudos to him. And so again, it's just that's where we're at. Like I think black voices are needed in all of these spaces. And it kind of takes me back to even being in high school. Like I've told you before, I went to a school called Spanaway Lake High School in Washington State, and it was a pretty diverse school, but it was still a white school at the same time. It was by a military base, so you had a really huge Pacific Islander population. So a lot of kids from Samoa. Like my best friend Brian at the time, when we were growing up, he was Samoan, and so you had a lot of kids that were like from Samoa or New Zealand or that whole Oceania region. Or then you had the Southeast Asians. So you had a lot of kids from like the Philippines and Cambodia and South Korea and everything like that. Then you had all the Native American kids, and you had the kids that were all mixed with something because, again, military base, people travel all around the world, go to countries, fall in love. And we had a lot of kids who were black and Korean or white and Filipino and just all kind of mixes of things. But, what made some things work at that school was like the student government. Somehow I got elected to be I'll bring y'all my yearbook. Hold on, give me a sec. Because I got it down here. I ain't gonna show no pictures though, because I don't look that good and my face was still fat. All right. Anyway, look, y'all, this is my old yearbook. But look, I was ASB president. Class 2006. Yeah, I'm old, y'all. But anyway. We are not about to go through this book like we went through. Oh, what's all this in here? Okay, I don't want to read what those are. But yeah, when I look back, there was a good mix of people from like all kinds of different backgrounds and various groups. And those people, like everybody kind of fought and vouched for what was theirs culturally. And so it kind of made things work where you had this pretty good melting pot of diversity, but you still had issues that you had to deal with. There were still some moments where I had to fry up a few people here and there, but like literally that was the reality. So again, you want that element of diversity. Let me see if I can find my picture real quick. I'm telling y'all not gonna recognize me because I don't look the same. My face was really full back then. Hold on, give me a minute. Let me find my class here. And mind you, we had 3 black staff. It was like 3 of us. Okay, I don't know if y'all gonna be able to see all of this. Where am I at? Here I come. Here I go. Okay. Let's see if I can get this angle right. All right. So I'm covered. All right. Can y'all see me? All right. This was me back in the day. Look how full my face used to be. I don't even look like that anymore. But anyway, so that was me back in the day. All right. That was young Calvin. All right. Anyway, I want to keep moving. Shout out to Queen Latifah. Thank you, and Bria Ashley. She actually started the groundbreaking for a low-income house, or not low-income, but affordable housing project that she is funding in her hometown back in New Jersey. So shout out to her. I think we need a lot more people to do that kind of work. It's not saying you have to use your money to build things, but again, always remembering where you come from and investing in your community. If your community has built you up to be great, make sure you pay it back so that the next generation can come up and have an opportunity. So shout out to her. The other thing I saw, this was interesting to me. Patrick Hawley, whatever his name is. So, if you remember, the CMT Awards were not too long ago, the Country Music Awards that took place. And so there were a lot of different Black entertainers that were at this award show. First of all, you had, what's his name hosting? I forgot the dude's name, but he's a dude that's, what's that guy's name? Y'all know who I'm talking about. What is his name? I cannot think of his name. He's in a few of them little action flicks. I forgot what character he is. Dang. Hold on, I'm gonna figure. Somebody tell me what's this guy. Anthony Mackie. Thank you, Clara Dennis. Anthony Mackie had hosted that year. Monica performed. There were a few other Black entertainers. There's also a country singer. I like her, Mickey Guyton, I think is her name. Mickey Guyton, she's like this black girl that makes country music. Her album is okay. I like her voice a bit more than the album, but I think her next album would be better. So you had a few black entertainers that were there. So Patrick Howley felt some kind of way. He wanted to know like why there were so many black entertainers there, and he pretty much wanted to rant and rave about how country is it's different and the award show is not Wakanda. And so somebody please remind him that country music is a black genre because we started it. And there's that. In addition, if we want to talk about while we talk about genres, it's interesting because while we're at it, country has actually been shifting to an R&B realm. If you pay attention, I know a lot of you guys don't listen to country music, but if you pay attention to what a lot of the biggest country hits have been for the last 5 and 6 years, these are literally almost R&B songs with just a little country twang added to it. But the rhythms, the beats, the drum loops that are there, even the chord progressions are all built around kind of a hip hop R&B aesthetic because the country acts have been trying to find ways to commercially cross over into rhythmic radio formats because that's really what you want to get on right now. If you can conquer rhythmic radio, you're going to have a top 10 hit in this country, in addition to what happens with the curated playlist. And so a lot of these country songs, and I'm not talking about like a Jana Kramer, I Got the Boy. That's like a real country song. But I'm talking about a lot of these songs where if you close your eyes and didn't pay too much attention to the vocal delivery, you would think that this was like some R&B type song. Like that is where we're at. And so it's interesting that so many people all of a sudden are like, oh yeah, there's too many black people at the award show. Mind you, Monica was there performing a country song. I'm like, what's the issue? You mad because some black folks are there? Are y'all afraid that we're going to come and take that over too? Because honestly, when black people jump into country, I think we do a damn good job at it. I'm not even going to lie. Like Darius Rucker does a good job. Tony Braxton had a wonderful song called If I Have to Wait off the Post album, which really should have been released to country radio. Beautiful arrangement. Kiki Wyatt had a great song, Lie Under You. Beautiful country ballad. Like, we can do country if we want to, and we do it pretty damn well if we wanted to. So it's interesting that, he wanted to go on this huge just moment to just do the most. And you see that kind of animosity anytime we come into a space that they think they own. It's kind of like when Beyonce did the CMAs that year and half the crowd was already pissed because she was there. And this is already after Lemonade and Formation. And they tried to paint the narrative that she was a police hater because she had the Black Panther homage at the Super Bowl. And then on top of that, she brought out the Dixie Chicks with her. Like, they hated it. It was so bad they took the performance off the website. All right. They get mad when we come into them spaces. Just understand, be happy we're not that pressed about country because if we wanted to take it over, we could. So y'all need to humble down over there, all right? Anyway, let me read a few comments because I've just been talking. I have not done a good job of reading the comments today. And y'all better not be firing up my picture. All right. Alan Lewis said, SWV, When You Cry is a classic. Yeah, that's like the best song off that album. Release Some Tension. When You Cry and All Night Long. Not All Night Long. I'm sorry. That's off Waiting to Excel. Rain on Me. Or Rain. Yes, actually, Rain. Do yourself a favor and go and play the acapella of SWV Rain. It's like the most, it just puts you here. It's the most relaxing. It just sounds so good. This is what I miss. And like, this is why I wish in music, and I don't know how long this thing is going to last, but I don't like the trend of artists putting all those filters on their voices because it's hard to figure out who is who because you can't really hear their real vibrato because it's been digitized. And you can there's certain people that I give a pass to. Like I think 7th Streeter, when she uses it, it works with her because she can actually sing. Right. And so when you talk about like her Call Me Crazy EP, it sounded really good when she had it. But we're now in a space where everybody and their mom uses like these filters. And so you can't even tell who's who. One of my favorite acts right now is Ty Dolla $ign. I like a lot of his collabs. But sometimes I can't tell if it's him or if it's somebody else because everybody's using the same kind of equipment on their voices. But what I liked about Rain is it's just their raw tone, their natural tones blending together. And it sounds so good. So good. And so I would hope that over time, more artists kind of just let their natural voices carry their songs. Let your natural voice blend and carry. Like, I can't wait to put out this Tony episode because there's a segment in the episode where I talk about how she did such a great job with blending vocals. And I always reference this song every time I do an R&B Zed video. But like Tony Braxton's Why Should I Care? You have Tony Braxton, Babyface, and Shantae Moore harmonizing together. So you have Tony, who's a contralto. You have Shantae Moore, who's a mezzo soprano, and you have Babyface, who's a tenor, and you have the three of them blending together on the hook, and it sounds so good because the voice that each of them would have in their voice, one of the others picks up that load, and it works so well. And it also works because it's just their natural voices and it's their tones. And I think that's what makes music so timeless. And there's so many examples of other people who had great background singers, like Luther Vandross, in my opinion, had with Lisa Fisher and the Lutherettes in them, like just beautiful arrangements where they can carry the song. So songs like Wait for Love just sound amazing, especially once they get into their pocket. Or even Luther, again, he did background vocals on Patti LaBelle's When You Love Somebody. And again, sounds amazing. When you talk about like a group, I've been talking a lot about Tony for a really long time, for a good minute, but they had really great arrangements on their songs vocally. And that's why a song like Lay Your Head on My Pillow, it just hits a certain way, especially when it gets to the second half of the song. It just sounds amazing. You know what I mean? And so vocals can do so much. You know, that's why TLC always sounded really good, because they had a lot of people working with them on the sides. But like a song like Creep, where you have T-Boz and Chili, but you also have Deborah Killings. But then if you do a song like No Scrubs, you have T-Boz, you have Chili, you have Tiny, you have Candy, you have Deborah Killings, all doing vocals. Or if you do a song like Waterfalls, it's T-Boz, it's Chili, it's CeeLo Green. Like there's all these different people that are on there. And so it enhances the sound that is there. So I would hope that people let your natural voice carry the song. I'm not against, the little filters and stuff, but when it's on everything, it ages your sound, because once this trend dies, you're gonna go down with it. You know what I mean? Um, and so, but anyway, I just thought it was stupid that Homeboy got pissed off that they whatchamacallit, were at the CMT awards, whatever. All right. Um Nightcrawler 86. I guess we can wind down. I'm supposed to talk about Harvard real quick, so let me do that really quick, and then I'm coming right back to you, Nightcrawler 88.6. Harvard has announced a $100 million endowment, which is supposed to pretty much serve as like almost reparations in response to their connections to slavery. Let me just read some of the article, the bits that I wanted to share. If I can find it. Okay. Harvard University is setting aside $100 million for an endowment fund and other measures to close the educational, social, and economic gaps that are legacies of slavery and racism, according to an email the university's president sent to all students, faculty, and staff on Tuesday. The email from Harvard President Lawrence Bacow included a link to a 100-page report by his university's 14-member committee on Harvard and the legacy of slavery. The panel was chaired by Tamiko Brown, a legal historian, constitutional law expert, who is the dean of Harvard's interdisciplinary Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. The email and report were released to Reuters. The move by the University of Massachusetts comes amid a wider conversation about the impacts of centuries of slavery, discrimination, and racism. Some people have called for financial or other reparations. The report laid out a history of slaves tolling on the campus of the university, benefiting from, let me read that one more time, sorry. The report laid out a history of slaves tolling on the campus and of the university, benefiting from the slave trade and industries linked to slavery after it was outlawed in Massachusetts in 1783, 147 years after Harvard's founding. So just think about 147 years of some shenanigans taking place in regards to the slavery that was helping to fund the university. The report also documents Harvard excluding Black students and its scholars, advocating racism. While Harvard had notable figures among the abolitionists and in the civil rights movement, the report said the nation's oldest institution of higher education helped to perpetuate the era's racial oppression and exploitation. The report's authors recommended offering descendants of people enslaved at Harvard educational and other support so that they can recover their histories, tell their stories, and pursue empowering knowledge. I think that's all I need out of here. Other institutions of higher learning have created funds in recent years to address the legacies of slavery. A law enacted in Virginia last year requires 5 public state universities to create scholarships for descendants of people enslaved by the institutions. So remember what I was saying about Georgetown earlier. What happened at Georgetown was not something that was isolated only at Georgetown. Pretty much almost most of the major universities that would have been in the United States while slavery was still in existence all benefited from slavery to some extent, whether it was through what you would almost call real estate, by like selling off slaves or buying slaves to kind of maintain, pretty much, what's the term I want to use? Dang it. I can't think of the term I want to use. Anyway, assets. There we go. Pretty much, your assets could even be how many people you had that were enslaved. So you had that happening. And again, like I said with Georgetown, what kept them afloat was they sold off some of those that were enslaved. All right. And so these big universities, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Dartmouth, all of these schools had something else going on in regards to what was happening with slavery. And then this ties into modern times because, again, these universities, once slavery was over, then black people still couldn't go there until after 1954. And so once slavery ends, you have another 100 plus years of leaving people out and pushing them out. And then even once black people were allowed to attend these institutions, then you had all of the legacies. And this is when you start seeing legacies and all these other things take place where, again, different things were taking place to make sure that certain groups did not come up in there, that they would not infiltrate. And even if we let a few in, we're only letting in just a handful so it doesn't mess up the culture that we've created. And a lot of wealth was accumulated just from those names. You got to understand why something like the Ivy League schools carry so much weight. They are seen as the pristine top tier, places of education. And look at how huge their endowments are. Their endowments are like compound, like the wealth that was built. Like when we talk about the wealth that's built within white America and the $13 trillion of buying power that they have, or I think it's actually more than 13 trillion. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I might have the wrong figure on that. But a lot of that is compound. It's residual. It's think about you bought a house in, and I think I talked about this last time. You buy a house in 1920 for $8,000 or $9,000, and it's in a place like Miami, Florida, right by where the strip would be, or it's right there in Manhattan, right in the middle of everything, or it's in Chicago, right by the water. It's in Aspen, Colorado, right by the resorts. It's in LA, right by the beaches, right by Santa Monica and all that. And you're able to keep that house in the family for years and years and years and years. Those properties today are worth way over 500,000. Depending on where you live, it's probably upwards of close to $1 million, depending on what the property is and where it's at. Like even where I have a close family friend that lives not too far from here. When they bought their house, fortunately, they were able to buy their house in like the 90s. They got it for $200,000 or $300,000. When they did the appraisal, it's worth almost $900,000, and that's just in 20 years. So imagine, or 30 years. So imagine, a home built 1918, 19, whenever, selling today. Or imagine the fact that maybe if they sold that house in the 1930s or 40s, they got a huge payout for it and they had enough money to go and buy something bigger and better. And you just keep going, you keep going. And before you know it, you have all this wealth. So like one of the things that I've seen people do, especially in the early 2000s, people that lived in LA or in the Bay, once it got too expensive, they sold their expensive house and moved to Seattle because Seattle was kind of similar to San Francisco, kind of similar to Oakland. And so the difference is Seattle at that point in time, houses were about $200,000 cheaper than what was happening in that region. And so now you come to Seattle with an extra $200,000 to play with. And so now, in addition to, still getting approved for a new loan or an FHA loan for a new house that you're buying, you now have $200,000 that you're sitting on. That possibly can be money for your kids' college. That can be money to invest or start a business. And before you know it, you're generating and creating more wealth. In addition to, if you were smart and you took out any kind of life insurance, once you kick the bucket and your time is up, your kid's getting a payout. And again, we talked about on the last live, Black people weren't even a part of the insurance policies that were out there. We weren't allowed to have it. And that's why it was always so hard to bury great grandma and grandpa and all them back in the day, because the family had to scrape together the pennies that were there. Now we have access to that. But again, for generations, we have been left out of so much. And so when people are always like, oh, y'all just didn't work hard enough, or y'all are just lazy, or even when people choose to migrate to the United States, like I really do think that it should be a requirement that people understand the plight of Black Americans when they get here to understand, because I'm tired of people like assuming things about us because they just honestly don't know, or they've been conditioned to think a certain way or believe a certain thing that was told to them. Because again, our history is never part of the conversation. Hell, we're just now learning about ourselves. If we're being honest, some of us, knew what was up, and we're still learning and getting deeper. But a lot of people have just gotten their wake up call in the last 2 years about what's happening. And so many people are playing catch up. So imagine, what that is for people who don't even have that burden, who have to do that, where we're not even a part of their radar anyway. Just imagine how far behind people are in regards to America's history. And it goes back to the opening conversation on this video. This is why people are trying to shut down these conversations, because once you open that can of worms, I mean, you got to address everything. That's where we are. So with Harvard and the 100 million, I would rather hopefully to me, that should just be scholarship for every Black student that goes there. for me. I don't know what the line items are and how they're going to disperse the money and what it's going to do or where it's going to go. I know they said it's going to go to families that are affected by, what happened in regards to those that were enslaved that the university may have owned. Yes, give them what is theirs. But I do think again, Harvard's endowment is in the billions. Let me see. Harvard endowment. What is it? 53.2 billion dollars is the endowment that they start their school year with. 52 billion. So that little cute $100 million that they just put out there and made a whole press release about, that was cool or whatever. But 100 million ain't gonna undo this 52 billion. That's all I'm saying. So just imagine when they start having to calculate reparations from a federal standpoint, what's gonna be owed if woo. All right, anyway, back to the comments. So that's all I got for all the heavy stuff. At this point, we're just chopping it up. Going back to your comment, Nightcrawler 886. What are your thoughts on the decline of group-based R&B like SWV, Boys to Men? Um, Flow is a current R&B group. I just discovered them like literally yesterday on Twitter. It's an R&B group, but it's such a rare thing to come by now. I think because the industry changed, there's less money to go around, and that's why you're not seeing as many groups. Because one, nobody's making money from streams and album sales. You make all of your money from touring and merch at this point. And sadly, a lot of new acts end up in a 360 deal. But think about most of the people who were in some kind of group, aside from the exceptions like a Boys to Men or maybe a Jodeci, or I can't even say TLC because T-Boz filed for bankruptcy twice, and then Chili had to file for bankruptcy once. Like a lot of these groups lost money or they don't have anything because again they got screwed over by the industry in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 80s, in the 50s, even in the 90s. And I think as we came into that era of information where we started learning what was happening with a lot of artists in their contracts, the artists that would have came out in the 2000s understood contracts a little bit better and understood the importance of royalties, the importance of publishing and everything else like that. And so again, if you're in a group, okay, yeah, so if you're in a group that has 4 or 5 members, like TLC, I remember they did their breakdown, right? So you have Crazy Sexy Cool sell 10 million albums, and so that's about 5 million, or they got 56 cents for each album that was sold, right? And so they, just in regards to the royalty check, once Crazy Sexy Cool sold 10 million copies, they get about $5.5 million, right? And so that $5.5 million automatically gets taxed. All right, so that cuts it down to about $2.5 million because that's like the 40th percentile or whatever, or 40, 50 percentile. So about 2.5 to 3 million, right? And then they still have to pay back anything that would have been in the advances. So the music videos, remember, they shot 3 different videos for Creep, right? So you got to pay all of that off. Waterfalls, which was this amazing video. They were using technology that had not been used in music videos yet. You remember when we used to be kids, or those who are in my age range, when we were kids and the Waterfalls video would come on, you couldn't wait when it got to the scene where they were by the water and they're doing this little thing in the 3D because you were trying to make out who was who, and you could see the little 3D T-bars with the bang and all that. Like all of that cost money. Or the Dig It On You video where they shoot it at the idea with the arena and try to do the very like movie glamorous ending kind of shoot. And so shooting all those videos, funding all of the promotional things that they have to do, the outfits and all that. So you got to pay all that back to the label. And then you still have to pay your lawyers, your personal attorneys, and then you still have your personal taxes that you already have to pay in addition to that. And so all of the members left for like $150,000. And so, and mind you, they had generated like, I think Crazy Sexy Cool by itself generated $70+ million for the labels. And so I think with groups, you're not seeing them because there's no money to be made in it. Yeah, you got BTS, but I bet their contract freaking sucks. And BTS is an anomaly already because that's another ball game. The K-pop industry is another planet, and they're still, all of those acts are still getting gypped, to be honest. And so I don't know if you're going to see the return of a lot of groups. I would love to because I do think they're needed, but I just think people don't want to be in groups because there's no money to be made. And a lot of the groups that have come out as of recent have not really been that successful. Fifth Harmony, in my opinion, was not a very successful girl group. As far as pop, yeah, they had a few hits here and there, but they didn't really make a lot of money from their projects, and they didn't really sell a lot of records. Yeah, they had some decent streams, but I don't think Fifth Harmony, because that's pretty much the last major kind of group that existed, they didn't really do that well, in my opinion. Even though they had a few hits. And it's so funny because I still remember their fans came at me for war because I remember they had performed at the Billboard Awards or something, and I said, maybe it was the AMAs. I was like, I don't think this group is going to make it because I see a bunch of soloists that are just kind of stuck together and they're tolerating each other. And I mean, they came and you don't know music, you don't know what you're talking about. And then, like, literally the next day, the Camilla girl was like, I'm leaving the group. I said, see, I told y'all. And I don't know who told Camilla she was the Beyonce in the group because clearly it was Normani, but whatever. I would even gave it to the Dinah girl, but whatever. Anyway, so we'll see. Let me keep scrolling. The Whitney biopic, I wish, that's course correction. I wish they would let her rest in peace. So listen, after this biopic, no more Whitney anything. Y'all done gave this woman 822 documentaries, and every documentary, all y'all want to do is talk about the drugs and talk about Robin. So if you're not going to celebrate the music, let her just rest in peace. Y'all didn't even like her when she was here. And this is not to you guys. This is to the media outlets that are, pushing all these narratives. Y'all couldn't wait to tear the woman down. And now that she's dead, they want to sit here and treat her like she's Mother Teresa. Mm. All right. Trevor Taylor said they were supposed to, and this is about In Vogue, they were supposed to have an album come out with that in regards to Runaway Love. But they never did because I believe Cindy had a baby. Yeah, Cindy was always pregnant. She had about 34 kids. And so, because she, like, if you saw my Brandy So It Happened video, I talked about the imaging of Black women in pregnancy in the music industry back in the day, and how if you watch the What a Man video with Salt and Pepper and In Vogue, they kind of keep Cindy in the back, and they do a lot of, chest up shots. There's not a whole lot of shots of her because she has on, mind you, all the other girls got the fun outfits. They got the shorts and stomach out, and they rolling and all of that, and they got Cindy in the big old overalls and the hat, and they're still having their fun. But there was a fear of showing people pregnant back in the day because they felt like it would compromise the idea of sex appeal. They felt like it would age different entertainers. I kind of talk about that a little bit in this Tony documentary I'm doing when it talks about her, having a child right in the middle of the More Than a Woman promotion. But yeah, In Vogue, I think had they been able to stay together for the EV3 album, which would have been EV4, I think they would have had a better outcome. I think Don just left a little too early. And mind you, EV3 still went platinum, but to go from being like this multi-million seller to just barely scraping platinum, it changes the dynamic of the group. And then the most interesting thing I always think of, like when Don went to Lucy Pearl, like Lucy Pearl and In Vogue dropped their albums on the same day. But as far as the Masterpiece Theater album, that's the album that had Riddle on it. I also think that's when they were their finest. They were fine in that video. But yeah, it's just interesting because, again, Masterpiece Theater didn't really do that well. Actually didn't do well at all. All right. Anyway, Black Women Read said, yep, I love how Terry holds that note. Oh, Runaway Love. I told y'all she holds like this old lady church note. I always say Terry is like the church member in the group because she had a very traditional voice. But she had that little, she just held this long, and like she just held it for like the longest. But no, Terry, that's my road dog. I love Terry Ellis. All right. Oh, this is interesting. Jonathan said Black groups are marginalized. Being R&B, or told they're being R&B when they were underrated and under pushed. Whereas the white groups labeled as pop, even though blacks created every genre of music from rock to country. When I did the last R&B is Dead video, I talked about how, in my personal opinion, I do believe that R&B is the most diverse genre to be in because you can literally do any and everything. Because again, because the industry was so racist that they just put everything in the R&B box if it was black. It allowed black artists to expand and experiment and jump into so many different sounds, where now we have this genre where you can do so much. And that's why you can have something like a Dion Ferris have a song like I Know. You remember that song? It was pretty much a rock song, but to me, it's still an R&B song. It's the like it's a rock song, but I mean, it was played like VH1 Soul, BT Soul back in the day, and all the music video channels that played R&B used to play it. But it was like literally, it falls in the R&B category, even though it's a pop rock song. And I think black artists that are in R&B get to experiment with so much. Pop does not give you that same grace as far as the marketing machine. You guys would just have to go back and watch that video because I don't want to regurgitate that video, but I talk about even like pop. There's two elements of pop. There's pop, the industry model. That's what most entertainers aspire to have. The industry model of pop that pushes you into success, where you have the backing, you have the label support, you get the big budget videos, you get the, which leads and pushes you into the big arena tours and the stadiums and the commercials and everything. But then there's pop, the genre. And pop, the genre, as far as the sound, has no real identity because it just latches on to whatever the popular trend is at the moment. And that's why so many people hold on to like the 90s to the early 2000s as far as R&B, because that's when R&B was the main trend and pop had to kind of follow suit and ride R&B's coattails. And so, like I said, I've always felt that R&B is the most diverse genre. It can just, it can go from like a neo soul wave with the Maxwells and the Lettuceys and all of them, or it can go all the way to like a contemporary sound with like, or an experimental contemporary sound with like a Khalees, right? Or if it goes to more of a contemporary R&B sound, kind of like what Beyonce was doing with B-Day, or even like a more pop-oriented R&B sound, like a Janet's All For You, or even like what Usher would have done more so with 8701. Like R&B just has all these layers. And then even today's times with what we have. So you have kind of like the vibe stuff. So you got the Summer Walkers and you got, you know, who else? SZA kind of falls in that bubble. But then on the other side, you kind of have like a Lucky Day who's kind of in his own lane. You have all these different artists that are doing their own thing. Stokely from Mint Condition is still releasing music. And he kind of likes to jump on more of like a world music sound where he incorporates sounds from the continent of Africa as well as the Caribbean and mixes it into R&B. So he has a song called like Victoria off his 2017 album that was really good. And there's a song that's out now. I can't think of what it's called, but the video comes on every day on BET Soul all the time. I might be the only person that watches that channel, but I might be keeping them in business. But R&B just has so many different directions it can go in because, again, they wanted to be racist and put all the black folks in R&B box. So the R&B folks that were in that box got the luxury to expand because they would never be considered anything else but R&B. So it expanded the genre. And so now that's why so many people fight and claw to almost be considered R&B. That's why Justin Bieber was so pressed to be nominated for an R&B Grammy. Take me seriously. I'm an R&B artist. No, you're not. You're not. You have pop backing, pop resources, pop everything. Yeah, you can sing songs that are influenced by R&B, but you're rooted in pop. Your core fan base is a pop audience. You are a pop artist, and it is okay. You don't have to, you know, colonize and monopolize every genre. And I think I said this too, like pop, in my opinion, is one of the least respected genres. And that's why pop artists often will jump into a different genre when they want to be taken more seriously. You know what I mean? And so, like, you know, they'll go more R&B to be taken more seriously by critics, or they'll go folk / country. They'll go alternative. They'll go in all kind of directions because, again, pop is not really respected because it doesn't have a long-term shelf life because it's music for the moment. And so when that moment dies, the trend dies. Anyway, now I said a whole lot. All right. Oh, y'all frying me up about Runaway Love. I said what I said. Runaway Love is their best single. Yes, I love Janet's 70s love groove as well. But it 24 play. 24 play. 24 play. All right. Let's keep it moving. Avocado Queen said, I think Janet's Made for Now was so beautifully done and paid homage to the Black diaspora. People don't give her credit for her video. She has a lot of videos that really celebrate Blackness and have always been like, I always think like you go back, you know, like the When I Think of You video has all of these different elements that took place as far, and it's kind of like a whimsical version of like, I can't even explain it, but there's just different elements that are hinted in that video. The All Right video kind of pays homage to like the early days of Harlem, and you have the Nicholas brothers in the video. You have Cap Calloway in the video. Like the 24 play video pays homage to Dorothy Dandridge. You have the Got Till It's Gone video, which kind of pays homage to the experience of blacks in South Africa during that time period. The Together Again video, she's at the motherland. Like she has all these videos that kind of just celebrate Blackness. She doesn't really get her kudos for that, but good for her. Anyway, yes, Morris Brown is back. Good for them. Somebody say, "Come on, cheekbone, show those pics." That must have been the yearbook, the yearbook. Yeah, my face was nice and full back then, and then it got like really like chiseled. When I was in college, it was like these were like hard looking. My face is kind of filled out a little bit more because I've gained some adult weight. But yeah, they said, "Why was that yearbook so close by?" this table back here, I have a bunch of stuff under it. So it's like yearbooks, family photos and stuff, a bunch of obituaries. You know, black folks, we hold on to obituaries when somebody passes. So I got a bunch of obituaries there. Old magazines. When I still worked for the magazine, I have all of like my Tribeca Film Festival press kits and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that just happens to be right there. My yearbook, I don't know where my Howard one is. I think my Howard yearbook's at my mom's house. But yeah, all right. Did I go to an HBCU? Yes, I did. I went to Howard. All right, let's keep it moving. Dang, I'm way behind in these comments. I must have been talking a lot tonight, huh? Sometimes I gotta just shut up and listen. Thank you, Billy Flood. That was the person I was trying to say, but Charlie Pride, right? That's literally one of the pioneers in country music. Thank you, Billy Flood. Charlie Pride, right? One of the literally the pioneers in all of this, right? And so many people have done country. Like even Tina Turner did a country record back in the day. Hell, Latoya Jackson did a country record. All right. I don't know if that's the best reference, but I'm just saying she made one too. All right. Tennessee whiskey. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that one. Um, the song. Come on, Billy Flood. You giving all the insight today. Ray Charles as well. Country music. Like so many people have done. The fact that people think there's no genre you get to hop on and try to discredit us with, because no matter what it is, y'all done stole it, especially jazz. Oh, don't get me started on jazz. Like okay, for those of you who really like are into jazz, and I'm not just talking smooth jazz, but like jazz, one of the best albums I ever bought. Hold on, let me get the title right. Hold on, give me one second. All right. Far East Suite, Duke Ellington. It is, here's the cover, right? This here is like probably one of the best jazz albums you will ever hear, right? Check that out. Now, and it's from like 1967, one of the best jazz albums. Even if you got a chance to watch Summer of Soul, like a lot of the jazz musicians that were featured in that, like black music is so just diverse. That's why I don't even like to put black music in different categories, because black music just it does everything. It goes everywhere. We're just so freaking talented. And I think I always say culture comes out of struggle and culture comes out of experience. And so because the world just has just done us so wrong, you know, our way of coping and building for the future was letting our talents, honing in on our talents and sharpening iron, right? And so I think that's why there's just a talent that exists. And so, and it's a global thing. Like how many times do you see like the clips of like the kids in like Togo or something, just kind of hanging out there, and somebody has a phone and they come up with these like elaborate dance routines? It's just in the genetics across the board. Same thing in the Caribbean, the black communities that are in Central and South America. But like, even when you're specifically talking about Black Americans, like, I mean, just the things musically that we've been able to do with literally nothing. Think about how most of your favorite entertainers, or your parents' favorite entertainers, depending on how old you are, and I'm talking about the entertainers that would have come out from the 40s into probably the 1970s, how most of them had no formal training in anything, all self-taught. Yeah, there were some who were able to get formal training in school or learn how to read music and stuff, but so many learn just from just raw talent. Like that's some kind of amazing stuff right there. You know what I mean? Anyway, all right, my chat is frozen. Okay, here we go. All right, dang, we are way back. Okay, okay, y'all said "Use Your Heart." That's the SOEV song. This is a comment right here, Ronald Eatman. White America will literally cut off its own nose to spite its face. So black people, know your politics and understand your climate. Meaning don't be passive in fighting for your own interests. And as far as that comment about like again, I always say this: people will be their own collateral in order to be right. And their definition of being right is staying above somebody else. Because again, in this country, some of the people who have literally nothing, the only thing they have is whiteness to hold them and make them feel empowered. And they will use that to somehow get a grip of something above everybody that they feel, is beneath them at any expense. And I think, which president said that? I always bring the quote all the time, but if you can convince Lowest man that he's higher than the highest black. Let me see. If you can convince. Let me see. I just want to get the quote right. Oh, Lyndon B. Johnson. There we go. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. He'll even hold on, my page needs to load. Um, um, hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. Like that's literally what you're seeing in America, and this is why so many like just lunatic people have been put into power and positions of power. Like, look at who's being elected. It's one thing to be on a certain political spectrum. But it's another thing when you just elect the lowest of low people to represent you just because you want to be right. You want to give it to them. You want to own the libs, or you take the country back. And so you just put anybody up there. Then folks get mad because the taxes are all jacked up and tax codes keep going up. Like that's where we're at in our politics. Anyway, come on, Elon. You giving facts today. They wouldn't even let us sell, or they wouldn't even sell us insurance, right? Nothing. You out of luck. All right. But slave owners, thank you, Asium Nilwan. But slave owners had insurance on their slaves and also got reparations for whatever it is that they lost once slavery was outlawed. So the 40 acres and a mule that was supposed to go to the people who were supposed to get it, some of them got it, and then the government took it back, took the land back, and then on top of that said, we're going to pay you for every slave you had. It's kind of like, remember when we talked about the Lemons trial? And in that case, this was a situation, it was rooted in Virginia. There was a family called the Lemons family. They had 8 people that they had enslaved. They had decided that they were going to move to Texas. So for some reason, they ended up in New York. I think because they were trying to follow the rivers and they were going to go that way and come down. But New York had a law where once you bring those who are enslaved in our state, they are free. And there were already some activists in New York who had got word that the Lemons family was on their way to New York. And so they pretty much advocated, and the Lemons were stopped. And let me tell you how this operates. They were offered, the government said, listen, you can't take these people to Texas with you because they're free. They're in a free state and you no longer own them, but we will give you the value of each and every one of them right now if you just agree to leave. And they were like, no, absolutely not. We've trained these people. These are our, I taught him how to feel. I taught her how to, they didn't want them. Like the fact that the government was so willing to just hand out money because again, these people were not seen as people. They were just seen as property. And so, yeah, we'll give you the difference of because we feel bad that, we enforce the laws that we created. So we'll still give you some money here. How much you need? And they were like, no, we go. So this mess went all the way to the Supreme Court. But see, this is where, oh, history just, there's so many gems in history, folks. The more you just dig, you find everything. I don't remember. I did a video talking about lemons. I think it's on the in the news in response to when there were a few politicians that said like America was the least racist country in the world, and then I was on my soapbox and wouldn't shut up, and so somehow I got onto that subject. I don't remember which video it is, but it's one of them. By the way, in the news will be back in May. I had to take a break with the in the news because I just had so much going on in April and March. Because some of y'all have been asking, you're like, you only be doing lives. I'm like, for me, it's easier to do live because I can put out a whole bunch right then and there and then go to bed as opposed to filming it. And then you got to go and edit and compress the video and then sit and upload. Oh, God, sometimes it takes forever. Sometimes those in the news videos take a day or two, it takes up your whole day. And so I normally have to do them on a Saturday, but then Saturday is the weekend. I still want to live a little bit sometimes. So, anyway. All right, I'm going to scroll down because we need to wind down soon. It's been a long, long day for me. Thank you, Lil I3D. 175 million, according to T-Boz, is what Crazy Sexy Cool generated. Because again, they sold 10 million copies in the United States. But overall, you got to still look at what happened internationally. And again, this is when CDs would retail for like $14, $15. And so for them to only get 56 cents and the rest of the 14 whatever goes to, you got BMG artists right here. You got LaFace here, then you have Pepitone, and then it's just like everybody was getting a pot of the money, and they weren't getting none of it. I wish in the movie they would have put the whole scene. T-Boz said Left Eye and went in there with guns to go and demand their money, but the movie took the guns out. They didn't want to put that part in there. D. Jordan said, is Kelly Rowland's group still together? From what I understand, June's Diary still is together. They just never had the right management. Interestingly enough, I did a paper in college one time. Actually, it was a speech. It was for my it was like a speech class or something like that. But I did this, it was a paper, but you had to present it as a speech. It was a speech about how I don't think it's wise for entertainers to ever manage the careers of other entertainers while still trying to be entertainers themselves. And I just talked about how I used a bunch of examples of different people who had these booming careers, and when they tried to bring somebody else on and manage them, it just didn't work well because they could not balance out managing that person's career and then still maintaining theirs. And a lot of times that other act is collateral. But June's Diary is a very talented group. They sound amazing. I wish them well. Have you H Dennis? Have you heard the limited release Janet song "Accept Me"? Yes, it's actually a really nice song. It's one of my favorites. I don't. I know because it was a B side for Velvet Rope. I don't even know because somebody was like, maybe you could take off "Tonight's the Night" and put "Accept Me" on there. But I like "Tonight's the Night." So, um, yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. Scrolling down. Thank you, Ms. Nuru. Neo is a marketing ploy as far as Neo Soul. It's just soul music. And really that's what it was. And I think the reason why they called it Neo Soul was because again, it was so left field from what the contemporary R&B artists were doing. They were trying to paint it as, okay, well, we don't know if we can market this as R&B because right now the definition of R&B at this moment in time is, Faith Evans all night long. That's kind of where we're at right now. So we're not sure what we can do with an Erica Badu, certainly. So we're going to call it Neo. So it's going to be the new soul that's here, So I think that's maybe where the name kind of got its origins from. Um, and now in modern times, what is considered neo soul is pretty much now just R&B or traditional R&B, especially on the Urban AC radio formats. Have you heard of Tank and the Bangas? Yes, I like the No ID song. That was Cody Conyers. Victoria Monet, she has a great project. Her actually, that's a very nice project. You should check it out. It is called. Hold on, let me pull it up here. My voice is giving out. I need to go to bed. I discovered her when I heard the song "New Love." Like I saw somebody had posted it on Instagram. Like check this out, and I was like, this is a nice song. And then I kind of dug into her work. But she has, and that was off that the New Love is off this project called like Life After Love Part 2. But the newer project, Jaguar, from like 2020 is a very nice project if you haven't heard it yet. Um, I wish there were more men in R&B that had success. Like women, in my opinion, they just carry the music industry. But I would love to see a lot more men kind of have a bit more success again. And the industry's been really hard on them lately. Um, all right. Oh, we're talking music now. Y'all getting it in. Oh, Tank Harrison. I'm about to say Layla Ali. Layla Hathaway, Baby Don't Cry is one of my favorite songs. Angela Winbush wrote it. It's a good mix. Layla Hathaway is very underrated, but I'm glad that she's getting her flowers and that her touring career has really boomed since the emergence of social media. Social media might have been one of the best things to happen for a lot of R&B artists because it exposed people to different sounds and really allowed people to really get into artists that you would not necessarily hear on the radio or see on television. And even with YouTube, you wouldn't know to search them because they're not being presented to you. And so with social media kind of almost being its own marketing space for a lot of artists, so many artists have been able to really pretty much resurrect their touring careers. And so Layla has been having a really great run right now. But no, she has some wonderful music. My favorite Layla Hathaway song is Lie to Me. It's off the album that she came out with in, I want to say 2012. That is I love that song. It's an amazing vocal delivery. And I even love the lyrics. I love the concept of the song. It's very nice. Dave Hollister, another one, just a talent who's very underrated, by the way. Um, all right, my chat wants to take its sweet time catching up to where you guys are at. All right, we are almost done. I'm not even about to talk about Diddy. I did enough videos on him. The FM4. I still think it's crazy that Chloe and Holly's Ungodly Hour only sold 24,000 copies. I I'm still feeling some kind of way that they got shunned out of every award show. Like Ungodly Hour, in my opinion, was one of the best albums to come out in 2020. And what I appreciated, remember how I said I was not a fan of people putting all those filters and stuff on their voice? They let their natural voices carry the songs. They use a lot of reverb to kind of let the voice carry, but like they had very creative songs on that project. I really liked it. Don't Make It Harder on Me. And I thought they were going to release the Busy Boy song, but they didn't. But that was a very nice project. I already said I wish Chloe and Holly would have done one more album before they started doing their solo endeavors. But, it is what it is. But yeah, we're in a space where album sales, I don't even think they will be a part of the conversation in 5 more years. It's really just going to solely be based on streams. And so I think the industry is going to find a way to kind of lock in a permanent threshold of how to measure what is successful with streams. And then that's pretty much going to be the standard of measurement because album sales just that you're it's just not carrying weight anymore. You have a number one album today, and the number one album might have sold 11,000 copies. And it's interesting because literally while I was just doing like I said, I've been working on my little Tony doc. Like when you talk about like an album like The Heat, for like its second week, it dropped to number 7, but it still sold 100,000 copies in that week. Like those days are long gone. Some people think the vinyl movement will kind of maybe reignite the album sales because I know Tyler the Creator, when he dropped his last project, he sold 50,000 copies just in vinyls of his latest release. So who knows where it's gonna go? Um, yeah. Um, FF8 now. Did you enjoy the Mary Mary BB and CC Winans verses? I did. Because first I wasn't gonna watch it because I had heard that they said it was you had to pay to watch. I'm like, I'm not paying to watch that, but it was free. The feed kept going out though, but no, that was a lot of fun to watch. Mary Mary be having some hits. I kind of forgot how many songs they have that I really like play out because I'm such a big fan of BB and CC and even CC as a solo act. Like CC has one of my favorite textures and tones as far as her voice. So I play a lot of CC Winans when I need to calm down because I'm not the most religious person, but like she's one of those people where she just speaks in this soft tone. Can't you just feel his presence? Don't you just feel his presence right now? And I'm like, okay, clearly I need to figure out how to get on this wave that she on because I ain't there yet. But like, so she just always gets me here. Like even the album I really like, the new one that came out is okay, but I really like the Let Them Fall in Love project. Like I really, really love the Never Have to Be Alone song. I love that song. And even the He's Never Failed Me Yet, because it's like this song that kind of pays homage to big jazz. It's a beautiful arrangement if you haven't heard that. All right. Christmas said BT Awards snubbed for Silk Sonic. I can't remember. Okay, maybe this was the Soul Train Awards, or maybe it was BT Awards. But I remember saying that I felt some kind of way that Silk Sonic had got like Artist of the Year at that moment in time, mainly because Leave the Door Open had just come out like a month earlier, and I was like, that kind of just. I get the success that they're having, but it's only been a month. So how are they like the Artist of the Year? Like that's something they would qualify for the next year. So it was like if for any other artist who had been out for the previous year, it sucked for them. I was like, man, listen, I like what they did with their project, but like, dang, man, it's only been a month. And y'all know Anderson .Paak is one of my favorite artists. And so, I'm gonna support his work. So it's kind of like, dang, I'm happy for them, but like there's politics and all of this. It didn't align. It's like if an album comes out, well, the Grammys just passed, but it would be like if an album came out a month before the Grammys and then won all the awards. It doesn't make sense because, of course, that album would be in everybody's kind of like mental Rolodex at that moment because it's current. And so you'd forget about whoever else had projects from the year before because, a year has passed. So I don't know why they did that, but oh well. I was talking about Lettucey, I Blame You. That's a good one too. Um, All right, we're gonna wind down because I'm getting tired. I'm exhausted, y'all. This has been an interesting month and a half. Very interesting. Um, so I'm gonna really once I come back from Chicago next week, I'm gonna really like jump back into my channel to put more content out more frequently again. I don't like taking breaks because I always feel so bad because I know y'all be like, where is he at? He always be gone and stuff. But trying to balance some other things happening at the moment. Plus, it's been a challenge. Larry White, do you like Brandy B7? I'll be honest, I did not like it when I first bought it at all. And then it grew on me. over time, and I understood what she was trying to do. But when I first bought it, I didn't like it at all. I was like, Brandy, and Brandy's one of my favorites too. But I was like, she sounded amazing. I didn't connect with it right away. And then you know how you have one of those days where you're like cleaning up the house and you let an album play or something in the background, and I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay, I get it now. And I give her kudos for doing something so different. That's what's dope about Brandy's albums. All of them give you something so different. If everything from the debut up to B7, like none of her albums sound alike, which is really dope. And she just gives you something different each and every time. Any idea when the next live will be? Maybe probably in like 3 weeks. I'm gonna try to get back in the habit of doing in the news again. I got to get that one going. Y'all know I hate making in the news, but I understand why. It's my most successful output as far as like people connecting and engaging. These lives really are just for you guys, the subscribers. Normally, people who don't subscribe to me don't really watch my lives, but you guys do. So that's why I like doing the lives because we can just chop it up and kick it. Um, but you know, I have some other things happening. Somebody said, "What's wrong with Bruno Mars?" I didn't say nothing bad about him. I mean, I have my viewpoints. I still think he's very talented. I would like for him to kind of secure a musical identity right now because I feel like I don't know who Bruno Mars is as an artist, but I see the talent that is there. Like, listen, it's no secret he can sing everybody under a table, and he has a great ear for music and an appreciation for black music. But I would like to know Bruno Mars as an artist. So if he does another album, I would love for him to just do an album isn't that isn't nostalgic. I just kind of want to see creatively where he's at right now. And it's not to say you can't do things that are nostalgic because most of my music pays homage to something from the past anyway. But so I'm one to talk, but I would love to kind of see him in his Bruno Mars lane doing his Bruno thing and without the influence of, what's happened in the past nostalgically. I just want to see kind of where he would be at. But I ain't gonna lie, that "Too Good to Say Goodbye" off that 24 Karat, man. I used to sing that song out. Um, oh, good job. Who said Van Jess? I like them too. What's that song I like? That would I hit you on your line? I forgot the word. Hit you on your line. What is that song? Come Over. That's my song. Van Jess, Come Over. That's a dope one. I like the song Curious as well. That's a dope one. There we go. The FM4 knew what I was talking about. That's a good one. Anyway, this has been really dope. I appreciate y'all for hanging with me tonight. I was not having the best day, but y'all definitely helped to re-energize and bring it all back. So thank you so much. Um, Jalil said, "How do you feel about Monica releasing a country album? I think she can pull it off. Forever Always. Yeah, that kind of has it. Forever Always. That's my man. I Miss Music. Hustler's Ambition. At this point, like I feel like people like Monica. I know Usher's still aiming to probably get one more big era. So people like Monica, Joe, Ra, and I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of the artists that are certainly intentional about how they do things. People like them, they are in a place where they can do what they want now, and I'm interested to see where they want to go. Like, and because like the industry's not the same. The industry's not going to receive them the way it did during their peak. So they might as well go ahead and do whatever they want to do. So I support somebody like a Monica doing a country album. Like I like country music. I think we run from it, or not even run from it, just because it's something that's been almost like we've almost been conditioned to think that it's white music, and it's not. So yeah. All right, Esmont, 4.99. Look at you trying to shake the table before I go to bed. What do you think about transgender people receiving payments in California just for being transgender and non-binary? I don't even know the origins of that. Like I haven't read up on that, so I can't even give an opinion. But I will say I would like for everybody to just be happy in their own spaces. Um, I have to look on that. I honestly have not read up on that one. I'm not researched enough, so I don't have the range to answer that question. Um, let's see. When you come to Chicago, go to Soul Veggie on the South Side. All right, I might think about it. Oh shoot! Thank you, Teddy. Abercrombie and Fitch. I was about to talk, skip it. All right, so I got a chance to watch the White Hot documentary about Abercrombie and Fitch, which was very. First of all, if you remember back in the day, this was a clothing line that was like huge. I was never really into it growing up. I didn't. First of all, my dad was so frugal. Well, I couldn't wear name brand clothes anyway. Like I got my first pair of Jordans when I was 31. All right, and I didn't even pay for it. It was donated because Nike had a sponsorship with our centers, and so they had an excess amount of Jordans, and they're like, "Oh, you want a pair?" I was like, "Sure." All right. You're like, "What size are you?" I'm like, "Size 12." And so that was my first pair of Jordans, and I think I've wore them twice. But anyway, so the documentary highlights that you have this man who built an entire brand on the idea of being exclusive, but specifically exclusive to the all-American white teenager slash young adult. And so, if you get a chance to watch the documentary, it talks about how they weren't hiring any black people and how the few black people that they did hire were only allowed to work in the back or they didn't get a lot of hours. You didn't really see, other people of other races, even Asian or Latino or anything like that, unless they were white passing. These would not be the people that would be the models for the marketing. It was off the chain watching that thing. I was like, this is one little screwed up company. But yeah, when I was in high school, the kids kind of had shifted over to Hollister, which still is an Abercrombie company. I think it's a subsidiary of Abercrombie or whatever. But when I was in high school, the labels that I could wear, I was wearing PacSun. What is it? Aeropostal, or how do you say Aeropostale? That's what I called it. South Pole. No judgment. Yeah, anything that you could, like, any shirt that was under $20, I could get. Any pair of jeans that was under like 50, I could get. Any pair of shoes that was under 70, I could get. If it was over that price, don't ask. But I never had an interest in Abercrombie because I didn't think their clothes looked nice at all. But no, they got caught in so many lawsuits. There were lawsuits about their hiring practices, lawsuits about their upper management, and the fact that everybody was white. Sexual assault allegations with the photographer. Like, man, I was like, this little label here is going through a whole lot. And then even the idea of kind of like the body shaming. Well, we don't want everybody wearing our clothes because not everybody's cut out to wear them. I was like, y'all got a lot going on with this. So check that out when you get a chance. Um, Interesting. I'm trying to think, what was I wearing? Like, so when I lived in Washington, like most of my clothes, if they weren't from the mall, because at the time when I was a kid, I used to think the Gap was for rich people because my parents just didn't buy it. Like Gap was like, and remember they had the commercials where they used to like sing the throwback songs and stuff like that. So they had that one commercial where they were singing New Edition, Cool It Now. And they had another one where they sang Madonna's Dress You Up in My Love, and then there was another one with the Mellow Yellow song. Um, the Gap to me I thought was like rich people clothes. So I could only get clothes from like there was a place called Tacoma Discount. There was the BNI, and these were like clothes that would kind of be like the early 2000s versions of like what Fashion Nova or what's the other one, Bobo or something like that, or Boohoo would be, only if it wasn't on the internet and it was in person. So you get like kind of like the discounted cheap clothes, but they look nice and have like the urban appeal. So that's where I got most of my clothes from. And the only name brand shoes I had were Adidas because you could get the shell to Adidas for under $60. So yeah, Abercrombie I wasn't interested in. And then again, like the black kids at my school didn't wear that. But it's interesting because if you just go back maybe 10 years earlier in the 90s, you did have a lot of black people who were wearing Abercrombie as well as like Tommy Hilfiger until the rumors and stuff started coming out. So interesting. Good time. Alan Lewis said Old Navy. Old Navy, I don't know if I had a lot of Old Navy stuff. Because we didn't go to the mall that often. Like when I say we lived in Spanaway, we lived in Spanaway and stayed there. We ain't ever go nowhere. Sometimes like everything was in the areas. Going to Tacoma Mall was like it was like a once every 2 months type of thing. We normally go to South Hill Mall, which was a little bit closer, going the other way. And then let alone Seattle was like a trip we would do once or twice a year. Mind you, Seattle was just 45 minutes up the road. But what a time! What a time! Yes, the FM4. I heard the racist comment from Tommy Hilfiger was a complete lie. It was. And the thing about it is this is before social media. So when rumors came out, it was hard to undo them. You know what I mean? Or even when the internet first, well, the internet was out, but social media wasn't really a thing, and people weren't really on forums and stuff like that. So it was hard to kind of dispel rumors that were out there. And that was almost like an in-house rumor that black folks had. Like, don't wear no Tommy Hilfiger. He told, because they were still saying that when I was in like middle school. It's kind of like when the guy Nolan Strong over at allhiphop.com kind of spread the rumor that Sierra was born with multiple sex organs, and then people ran with that for years and years because again, Twitter wasn't out yet. And the only social media that was even around would have been Zanga, if you remember Zanga, because MySpace, I think, might have just been brand new. But MySpace wasn't the format for MySpace wouldn't have been set up for you to kind of have whole forums and debate about different things. So if you weren't on the music forums, and a lot of people were not on them except for like music nerds like myself and other folks, it was harder for rumors to get like, seam ripped and saying, no, that's not true. There's so many rumors that used to come out. There was a rumor one time that like JD had, assaulted with the S word Bow Wow. I remember that came out when I was in middle school, and all of us believed it. And we don't know where it came from, but everybody was talking about it at lunchtime. Like, you know what I mean? There was a rumor that Lil Kim had to get her stomach pumped because she had just had too much fun with a few men and they finished and she consumed, if you know what I mean. Like all of these rumors used to fly around and it would be so hard to kind of undo them because social media wasn't there to correct things. It's kind of like, again, like even like, well, even though they admitted that they put their rumor out there, but even the rumor about Janet trying to make Tupac take an AIDS test because she didn't want to kiss him on Poetic Justice, like it was hard to undo a lot of those rumors that were out there. So yeah, man, such is life. Oh, I forgot about Fat Farm. I didn't have anything from Fat Farm, and I didn't have anything from Fubu. Or and Rockaway was too expensive. Sean John was too expensive. I knew not to ask. So like I said, Aeropostal, PacSun, South Pole, whatever was in Macy's, because Nordstrom was too expensive. Like my parents always had money, but they were frugal and responsible, and they were like, we're not just gonna be spending money to spend money. And some of that has rubbed off on me because sometimes I'll be at Nordstrom and see like some jeans. I'm like, oh, these are nice. And then they'd be like, you look at the price tag and it's like $140. And so I always try to do that thing where I don't want people to realize that I'm not paying that. So I'll keep looking at the pant. Okay, knowing I'm about to put them back because I'm not paying no $140 for no jeans. Okay, then fold it up and finally put it back. Like ain't nobody about to judge me up in here. All right, let me get out of this store. Let me go on back to the other side. So yeah. All right. Oh, I remember and one too. And one sneakers. I remember that. I remember there was like the basketball league too. And I remember all the girls used to be obsessed with the hot sauce player because they used to always be obsessed with who was going to do his hair or braid his hair. So yeah. Oh yes, Danny Gurley. People still believe those false gender rumors. Yeah, they have run with that and won't shut up about it. They love to kind of, sometimes when people have a vendetta against folks, they don't matter what you say, they ain't gonna bounce or budge on anything. You know what I mean? All right, we definitely were supposed to get off this. It's already 12:10, and I do have a meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Let me read my little clock here. Oh, it's already Thursday. Happy Thursday, guys, on the East Coast and over in Europe and on the continent and anywhere else outside of the last few time zones in the United States that are not aligned with the East Coast. um, yeah. All right, I'm gonna read two more comments, then I'm gonna get off because I need to go to bed. I forgot about Nautica. Yeah, Nautica was one. Um, Happy Thursday from Europe. Thank you, Avocado Queen. I didn't know you lived in Europe this whole time. Oh, actually, I do remember because you were on the Zoom party with the first one we had. I remember now. See, I be remembering y'all. All right. It's 9 a.m. over here, or 9 p.m. over here in LA. Yep. All right, guys, this has been fun. One more comment because I said I would do two. Scrolling. Hey, Bibby said, see, that's why you had to work at Foot Locker and layaway first bomber jacket, Air Force Ones, and white Reebok. Um, mm, I couldn't work at Foot Locker because it was too far from the house. Again, Spanaway was like in the middle of nowhere, and you had to go to Tacoma or to Lakewood or to South Hill to go to anything. And so, yeah, there was no Foot Locker in Spanaway. You would have had to go to like Tacoma Mall or when there was a Lakewood Mall. I think it's like a Lakewood Town Center now to work. But I only had one job as a teenager, and it was working at the skating rink. And then I was let go before I could start because the person that recommended me, God, sadly, they had a friend that was in a really unhealthy relationship, and then the boyfriend came and shot up some people, including the girl that recommended me and her mother. And so when the investigations and everything happened, the lady that owned the skating rink was like, I don't want anybody who's even associated with any of them working here. So I was let go before I could even start. Fortunately, both of them survived. The girl that was shot, because she was shot in the face, you can't even tell because the doctor did such a good job, so you'd never know that happened to her. But the mother was shot 10 times, I think. I can't remember, but the mother did survive. But it was horrible. It was my senior year of high school when that happened. And I was excited about the skating rink because I was like, I was gonna be the DJ person and do the music. I couldn't wait to get the music. I was ready, and it wasn't like I was gonna be. It was like literally just have the playlist and hit play. But I was gonna have the best songs. Boy, I was ready. Skating Station. It used to be Patterson's, and then it changed to Station. I was ready. Let me go. And then by then I was already doing like choreography and stuff. So that's really where my money came from, like teaching and coaching and stuff like that. All right, guys. I believe Calvin, you briefly mentioned this in one of your podcasts. Yeah, I certainly did. I'm glad you listened. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging with me. I am going to bed. Please stay safe and sane in these crazy streets. Like I said, May is kind of like my refresh button to kind of get some more content out there. So I appreciate those of you who have been patient because I have not really made a lot of content for the last 2 months. So thank you for hanging with me. Anyway, I'm out. Good night. Stay safe. Stay sane.